Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to your doom. Oh, crap. Hang on. There we go. Now, welcome to your doom. God. You can tell it's a busy morning when I forget a step. As usual, I want to start with the usual preamble of random smatterings of news, of which I actually have three. First and foremost, we are now 3 weeks, well, in 3 weeks minus 1 day, I will be seeing Endgame. In 3 weeks minus 2 days, Endgame comes out. It's a weird thought, isn't it? If you think about it. That's what, 21, 22 movies, and a little over a decade of cinematic history, all coming to a conclusion in 3 weeks. Feels weird, doesn't it? Like, I know that sounds like a strange thing to comment on. I actually kind of commented on something similar when it came to the Infinity War build-up, because we've never really had this. This is unique in cinematic history. We've never had a long-standing cinematic series franchise with interconnected continuity and effectively one major story arc that is reaching a conclusion point. Just weird thoughts. Anyways, as I just mentioned, I'm seeing it on the Saturday, which would be the 27th. Good luck, if and but. I mean, I know that sounds horrible, but honestly, I hope you manage to avoid them. I mean, I think we all know what's going to happen story-wise. They've been pretty obvious about it. Squirrel Girl is going to show up, and then Ant-Man is going to shrink, and then jump into... Later, Adam, I will be playing Atelier Sophie, the Alchemist of the Mysterious Book. We'll be continuing that premiere run. Excuse me. I wanted to update you guys on the shipping things for the pins. So, I have shipped out almost all of the pins. With two caveats. First of all, I got some orders after I shipped them out. So there are, I think, 3? I actually have to go through the list. I'm trying very hard not to actually open up these emails to help me keep track of it. But I think there's 1, 2, 3, 4. There are actually 4, excuse me. 4 orders that came in after all the other orders. So I had to glance at those. Hopefully that'll be tomorrow. Fingers crossed. I do have to mention, though, with regards to international orders, I'm running into a giant wall on international orders. There's a huge amount of paperwork that needs to be processed, and it's just being a complete pain. I'm gonna try and actually talk to some people in person tomorrow. Again, assuming I get out to the UPS store or the FedEx store and be like, hey, look, I just want to ship these to these people in these other countries. And we'll see how that works out. I do know the item code. I know the international item code for these pins. I don't have it written down right now, but it's such and such and such and thing. So I'm still trying to send the international stuff. The good news is I'm pretty sure anyone in Canada is good to go. It's just going to be a little pricey to send it, but that's okay. Not so sure about everyone else. Yeah, here it is, 71179045. That's my HTC for these pins. Yes, I wrote it down because I'm not an idiot. So all these people, hopefully I'll get pins to you, but I can't promise anything. I just can't. I also had to look up the exact composition of the pins for shipping things, excuse me, which is zinc and nickel, for anybody curious. Probably, Adam. There's a couple of theaters. I don't know if anybody else's theaters are doing this. Speaking of the Infinity War thing again. They're actually running massive marathons of the movies at a discounted price. When I say massive marathons, we're talking 59 hours. Like, several screens are basically just devoted to doing the lead up to Infinity War over... I think they actually start this week, here, at least. I'm not sure in other places. I'm not doing that, consequently, but that's mostly because I've kind of already done my own lead up without really meaning to. Spoiler alert, I have actually already. Yes, I forgot the topic list. I'll think about putting it up later. Spoiler alert, I've actually already done my ruminations on the Phase 2 movies, and that's kind of my own lead up into Endgame because I don't have time to just sit and watch movies. I got work to do. Thank you very, very much. Oh, geez. Thank you very, very much to Zara. And thank you very, very much, Junk Garage. As ever, much appreciate both of your guys' support. Thank you, both of you. To Zara and Junk Garage, what would you like to put your subs to, if anything? But yeah, so I'm going to try to get out and send out a few additional shipments Monday, and I'm going to try to figure out the international thing. No promises. That's where we're at with that. Now, I'm going to... Sure, Junk Garage. We'll go ahead and toss it to that. Hang on, let me jot that down. 21, I believe, Jaluda. I could be wrong about that, though. You... Thank you very, very much, MS Cardo. Again, much appreciate your continued support. You're almost at the year club, I notice. And I have jotted that down for Spider-Man DLC. Now, to Zara, I have to look something up. Like you do. I know Tazara's hasn't even been mailed yet because they literally refused to ship one to frickin' a P.O. box because I don't even know why. Is this what I need? Good morning, Blackfile. Good morning, everyone, by the way. Where's my... Here we go. There we go. Perfect. Okay, so that is... You're not going to tell me? Seriously? Ah, okay. That makes no sense. 86, 12, 18? Sorry, the Twitch changed something on me, and so I have to consider Tier 3 subs different than Tier 2 and Tier 1 subs. And I'm trying to get some information on that, and it's actually not helping me. I love this, by the way. My average viewers is down, my live views is down, my followers is down, my subscriptions is down, my revenue is down. Everything's down, apparently. Which I find funny in its own right, because actually, technically, I'm on an upswing right now, but whatever. I'm guessing that's just within the last... Yeah, it's within the last month. That's what it is. Okay. That's what I needed to know. So that's... now I need to do math. Damn it, Tazara. 17. Okay, so... Got it. That's what I needed to know. Okay, so it's 8 towards Wolfenstein. And 8 towards Tower of Time. Okay, now that we got that sorted out. Hi, Max Time. Yeah, international shipping, it's about $23 to ship these to Canada. I know that pretty definitively. I've already looked that up. I'm not sure about other countries. And I know what you're thinking. $22? Oh, that makes sense. They're big, giant packages, right? They're Anyways, moving on. I suppose I could get a topic list going. I guess. I could do my job and not be tired all the time. No, Hazardous, I have not. I've never even heard of it. What is that? What are you talking about? Sarcasm. You're fine, sorry. It's just, like I said, they updated something and you wanted to split it, and I'm like, I need to figure out what a split is exactly. I just need to remember 16 is now the new number for tier 3s. Okay. Wow, that's a heck of a topic list. Now, Mike Romano there, he's even better than your usual topic list. Like, Mike Romano, he just shows up and he's like, hey, what's up? And then the topics just line up perfectly. It's like Tetris. It's just perfect. Thank you very, very much, Mike Romano, as ever. Much appreciate your sub. Thank you. Would you like to put that towards something? So, I'm actually already out of random news. So, let's talk about Anthem. Kind of. I don't even want to make this a topic, if I'm being completely honest. But people just keep asking over and over and over and over, when are you going to talk about the Anthem thing? So let's talk about the Anthem thing. Can I just say really, really quick here that we've already covered this. Everything that has been discussed and analyzed is something we've already talked about for a year. This is nothing new. This is nothing news. It's just confirmation of what we already knew, at best. I'm sorry to sound so harsh about this, but what I'm so weirded out by is I don't understand why people act like this is new. I'm sorry, it's weirding me out. Oh my god, did you hear all this amazing thing? I never realized it was that bad. Why? We've known this for over a year at this point. You guys remember back when Andromeda came out? And as in the lead up to Andromeda, I discussed how they were having behind-the-scenes issues, and there was a huge amount of management discontent, and the one team was disagreeing with the other team, and everything was going to hell between them. And then, it's just a bit of personal frustration for me. What happened shortly thereafter is Kotaku put out an article saying everything I just said, and then people are like, oh my god, did you see that article? And I just remember going, I feel similar here. Now, granted, obviously Schreier did a fairly in-depth look into this. It's like, what, like a 30-page article or something like that. And I have read the whole thing for anybody curious. But again, it's nothing new. This is exactly the same problems that they've been having for some time now. And we've known about the BioWare issue for at least going back as far as I'd say Mass Effect 1 and Dragon Age Origins, I think, is really when the whole, what do they call it, the BioWare magic or whatever, kind of became a thing. You know, years of having issues, developing the game, and then it just all kind of comes together at the end, right? That whole thing is not new. And it's probably worth noting that that was true when other people worked there who basically do not work. I'm not even actually sure if anyone who was part of the BioWare team still works at any of the BioWare offices. I don't know. I have no idea. But I do want to comment on one thing. So, ignoring my own, obviously, issues with this, let's just move past that for a second. Let's go ahead and discuss something that I do think is worthy of discussion when it comes to Anthem. And that is the lack of a mainliner. Now, I've said this for a few thousand times, but a good manager, a good management team, is as invaluable as Link over here. Like, without Link, what do you have in Legend of Zelda? Think about that for a second. I'm kind of joking here, but let's turn this into a real thing because Tazara got me right in the mid-stride here. What would Legend of Zelda be if you just removed Link from it? I'm not saying add anything new. I'm not saying anything addition. Just Link is gone from Legend of Zelda. What would you have? Thank you very, very much, Tazara. As ever, much appreciate your support. What would you like to put that towards? A game that plays Zelda? No. Because Zelda's off doing her own thing in the games. Remember, the game is exactly as it is, but minus Link. Most of you probably see where I'm going with this. You'd have some interesting ideas, a fascinating backdrop, some good concepts, some good level design, some good gameplay ideas, and nothing bringing it together. That is the value of a truly good manager to a project, with a true good leadership when it comes to any kind of development, any kind of creative development, rather than, not just video games. It actually irritates me that we have that it has become normal for the term manager to basically be a derogatory term. Now, it's earned because most managers are crap, right? It's how rare is it to actually have a good manager? Let's see, how many good managers have I had in my entire life? Two. I can think of both of the names, Callie and Dave. Callie was cool. Dave was cool. Both of them were good managers. Both of them knew how to actually manage properly and actually did their job properly, right? Two. And yeah, no kidding, Inquisitor. 2 out of how many? Oh, way more than 2. Cute, Doctor Who. Cute. Yeah, that's... Yeah, I imagine most of you who have worked at any job ever probably know what I'm talking about. And that just brings me back to my point. If we had someone's... I firmly believe, and I want to say this very clearly, I firmly believe... Yeah, exactly, Negodai. I firmly believe that if there was a good leadership team in charge of Anthem, Anthem would be a great game. I believe that firmly. But that also means that we would have had to have a good management team from the beginning. And also, I should probably add the proviso that it would probably be a great game with a lot of weird Grek in it because it's still an EA game. But I still stand by my statement. Same with Andromeda. Andromeda did have notes of interest in it. It just felt like a first draft that was thrown together because it was. That could apply to a lot of games, I agree. And that's kind of my point. This is... the Anthem thing is just normal. I have said many times that I feel that it is a degree of luck when we actually get really good games out of AAA studios. And you know why? Because a AAA studio, more than any other type of studio, relies on a good management and executive team. Like Mega DA over there. If without him... Thank you very, very much, Mega. Hang on. Actually, I'm keeping track of that in a separate location. Give me a moment. I wasn't expecting any of those today. I mean, I am one of those weird people who genuinely believes that Witcher 3 was luck. I do. I could be wrong about that. I don't know. But it is my opinion, here we go, that the only reason that Witcher 3 is as amazing as it is because it was lucky. And that's towards the pin fund. Thank you very much, Mega, for helping to cover that. I will. I've already jotted it down, and I'll... Once I have the final total, I will tack that onto it. I'll put it on the website. And we can blame EA as much as we want, because EA is... EA. EA deserves all the blame it gets. Let's just be 100% clear with here. If EA walks around and shoots people for 5 years and then doesn't shoot one person, we can still blame EA for that. But I do firmly think that this is on BioWare. In fact, this is something that, again, in my opinion, it goes back a long time. I remember a discussion my friend Pax and I had forever ago about how more of Mass Effect 3's problems was on BioWare's side than it was on EA's side. And I still kind of think that, to be completely honest with you. But anyways, I don't really have much else to add here, to be completely honest. Good management team, good mainliner, good coordination. Duh, right? Just my thoughts on that. Just my thoughts on that. Moving on. I don't want to discuss Witcher 3. I don't want to get into that. That is a whole other topic, and frankly, we'll see with Cyberpunk. That's we need the proof concept, and that's Cyberpunk's going to be that. So Yeah, several people are like, at least Dragon Age 4 is confirmed. It is. I mean, it is in development, but as I've mentioned many times, in development doesn't actually mean anything. Let me use a parallel before I move on to topic. Yeah, no kidding, Hazardous. How many of you guys have watched the Hobbit trilogy? Now, obviously, just I'm not trying to say whether the Hobbit trilogy is good or bad. I'm not trying to get into that. There's actually a lot of grunk that happened behind the scenes in the Hobbit trilogy. I discussed it briefly, very briefly, in my own rumination. But the main point was that they just kind of stewed for years in pre-development without a script, without art designs, without direction, without anything when it came to the development of the Hobbit trilogy, or what was at the time the Hobbit duology, actually. Until finally they had the green flag to actually begin development, and then all of a sudden the actual development time, the actual filming and whatever, got crunched, right? They spent years meandering with no direction and just wasting money until all of a sudden, okay, we're actually going to go ahead and make the film finally, and you have, I think it was 11 months, I want to say. I could be wrong, maybe it was 13. But it was not a long period of time to make the films. Go! Sound familiar? Ugh. Anyways, moving on. I will also say this is probably the only time you'll hear me actually recommend a Kotaku article. If you do want to read it. Yeah, I was also going to mention that they were mandated to make 3. So let's talk about some trailers. Why not? People have asked me to talk about these trailers. I don't mind talking about these trailers. How many of you are even remotely interested in the Dragon Quest movie? Suppose I should raise my hand on this one. There is a trailer out. It is, of course, in Japanese. I have no idea what they're talking about. It is animated. It is full animation. It's basically done in the style of the cutscenes that Dragon Quest games have been in for a bit now, most notably Dragon Quest XI. It actually looks pretty decent. It is heavily based off of the story of Dragon Quest V, also known as one of the best Dragon Quest games. Arguably, in my opinion, 11, 5, and 8 form like a top 3 Dragon Quest games, at least for me personally. I know quite a few other people enjoy Dragon Quest V as well, so it was a good pick to go with. It's like if they're going to make a Final Fantasy movie, they should probably go with 4, right? 4 or 7. So they went with 5. I'm not 100% sure what I think of it, but it's interesting that they're going for it. What I don't know is if it's coming out outside of Japan. And that's really the biggest thing I wanted to bring up, is that I'm curious if they're going to actually go in any direction with this, other than just, well, it's a Dragon Quest thing, and only Japanese people like Dragon Quest, right? However, in the interest of honesty, it's probably worth noting that it does take a decent amount of time and money to, export a film to other countries, so it's entirely possible we will never actually get it outside of Japan simply for financial reasons. I sincerely doubt it'll hit theaters out here. So maybe we'll see it on Amazon in a few years. I don't know. And yeah, probably just slap a dub on it. You're probably right. Yeah, proper localization also takes time and money. You're right, Max Time. We'll see. We'll see. I do want to talk about the Joker trailer briefly. So the Joker trailer came out, of course. And the Joker trailer is interesting. So I've talked about the concept before of doing your own take on a character. In fact, I'm pretty sure I've talked about that specifically regarding the Joker. I believe that was during our Batman Telltale streams. And there's something fascinating about being able to go ahead and do your own take on a character. Like, there's something interesting about that from a creative perspective, at least for me and several other people I know. I'm sure at least some of you understand what I mean by being interested in taking your own, doing your own take on a thing. Now, that being stated, it's interesting the direction they're taking with this. It does seem to be based in part on The Killing Joke, one of the only Joker comics I actually really don't like, personally, but a very famous one, a very well-received one. I will say that... okay, hang on. Hang on. I will say that Tazara is interrupting me as usual. How dare you, sir? Give me just a second. There we go. So noted. Thank you again, Tazara, very much. It feels like Joaquin Phoenix is a strange actor because he's a pretty good actor. He's an exceptionally method actor, but I can't name anything he's been in I've actually really enjoyed as a film. And I looked. Pax and I were actually looking up all the films he's been in. Just a weird thought there. But what I do think is that his take so far is something that I find excellent. Like, just in the trailer, I already like his take on the Joker. The broken, bitter man who is sick of being literally beaten on by everything around him. I mean, actually, quick aside, I just have to comment on how insane the trailer was. And in fact, I actually was thinking at first, oh wow, this is ridiculous. Until I realized, oh wait, no, they're in Gotham. That makes perfect sense, that kids would attack a random guy on the street. Like, literally attack, physically cause actual damage to someone. In Gotham. Because it's Gotham. I can see that in Gotham. Anyways. But, I could see I could see the perspective of someone who is so broken down by life. And I also want to agree with the idea that I've heard a few other people posit, that this is going to be a little bit more focused on class struggles. Specifically, the poor versus the rich. If you actually look at the way it's presented, in almost everything, there's a lot of visual shorthand showcasing the Joker, or Arthur, as someone who is poor, who lives by himself he lives with his mother. They don't have a lot of food. They don't have a lot of money. They have a small apartment. And at virtually every time there's someone who is oppressing or opposing him, it's someone who is in much nicer clothing or is from a much nicer area or whatever, right? That's a fairly consistent presentation. So, I'm not sure what I think about that, but it does kind of work for me. It kind of works for me because I like the idea of someone who basically just... Okay, let me rewind here a second. Yeah, I've seen that. Someone said that in chat just a few minutes ago, Hasdus. I don't know where the Arthur name came from. One of the things I liked about Heath Ledger's The Joker was that he was someone who just didn't care. Now, I know that sounds like a strange thing, and so give me a moment to explain what I mean by that. This will actually be relevant for our Shazam discussion, too. Most people can think about doing things, can conceptualize them, but don't really have the actual impetus to do them. Good things and bad, actually. And the idea of actually taking the effort necessary to do something horrible, most people have that part of themselves that prevents them from doing that, either for morality's reasons or their own personal ethical concerns, or because of the limitations of what they feel they can do, or because, and this is going to sound strange, they care. Not necessarily caring about the person, but more about the consequences. In other words, the idea that they don't want to deal with the consequences of their actions. But the Joker, Heath Ledger's Joker specifically, just really did not give a damn. He was willing to do anything. He had no limits. The mafia gang, being members, the mobsters, they had limits because they had goals, they had ideas, and then they had, they didn't want to lose. They had things that they valued. They had things that they cared about that they did not want to lose. They didn't want to lose their power, they didn't want to lose their money, etc., etc. Right? Now, how does this tie back into...
Welcome. Pay close attention. Hopefully you'll learn something.
How does this tie back into Doctor Who? Well, in Doctor Who, the Doctor finally finds the Joker and tries to redeem him, but he finds that he can't, so he has to kill him. But the Doctor doesn't kill. So then the Doctor goes crazy and turns into Superman. Well, I appreciate it very, very much, Doctor Who. As ever, much appreciate those donations, those subs, and all the support you give. You don't have to give anything. I understand completely. I also understand being very, very sick for a very long period of time. Nevertheless, I will jot that down. It's going to be down here, because we keep track of those separately. That was for Young Justice, right? Yep, Young Justice. Who? There we go. There we go. Thank you again. Anyways, point being, sorry, getting back to the thing. I'd have to look up the definition of nihilism to really answer that, Fuzzy Duck. But again, my point is that the Joker as presented there was someone who didn't give a damn about consequences. I've actually myself used the argument that he was playing Grand Theft Auto, just in real life. Now, if you don't understand what I mean by that, when you play Grand Theft Auto, unless you're speedrunning or doing a challenge run or whatever, you don't care about getting caught. You don't care about running over civilians. You don't care about getting attacked by the enemy. The worst that will happen is you'll respawn. You know, wasted, camera kind of goes back and forth, and then you're back at the hospital. You don't care. Now that makes perfect sense, because it's a video game. But the Joker has that mentality in real life. He is willing to go that far and do that much, because to him it doesn't matter. At least that was my take on the Heath Ledger to the Joker. Moving on. Joaquin Phoenix, right? I knew it! The only solution is to play Enderal. You know, that actually makes a lot of sense when you think about it. I hear Enderal is a good, cure-all for people who are insane and crazy at the same time. Yeah, exactly. You lose money and weapons, but it's a GTA game. Do you know how easy it is to get weapons in GTA? Hang on, let me punch a person until he calls the cops. Oh, the cops have shown up. Okay, let me kill the cops. Grab their guns. I have guns now. I need some ammo. Let me go after some cops to get some ammo. It's a joke. Thank you, Eingrad. Thank you very, very much. Much appreciated, as always. And that's my point. So again, I'm sorry, bringing this back to Arthur, bringing this back to Joaquin Phoenix's Joker. In him, I see someone who does obviously care and is basically being pushed away from that. Being pushed in the direction of not caring. Of being pushed to the point where he is willing to accept consequences or simply bypass consequences. Yes, I did see what that note said. It was the first thing I noticed about the note. I didn't even see the jokes at first. I just saw the people expect people with mental illnesses to act like they don't have them. Now, that's very interesting to me, consequently. Because we're basically portraying him as someone who is functionally, or that's a wrong word, who is a higher functioning mental illness person. Someone who can exist in society, but still has issues. There's actually a nice contrast because they show him at the asylum with a person who obviously can't exist in society. Because there are people who have a degree of mental illness who basically cannot cooperate or interact with society on any level. Like the guy who was literally just... and that may sound like an exaggeration. I've actually seen people like that in real life. I have actually interacted with people who are just that far gone mentally that they cannot do anything. Yeah, of course the pills don't help. Do the pills help in real life? This is Gotham! Anyways. So we have someone who has a mental illness of some type. They'll probably keep it vague, if I'm being honest. And we have someone who obviously is poor. And that's really all we need. The basics of it is there. But one thing I want to give Joaquin Phoenix in particular, and this is interesting to me, is that early on he's very hesitant. Just kind of... little shy, actually, you know. And he has very, very small facial... I'm actually doing too much, you know, as right now, but of course the camera's a lot more zoomed out on me. Very small facial motions, very... hesitant, kind of like little bursts of movement and then going back to thing. And then when it goes to the point where he basically is in full costume, he is fully smooth, fully confident. There's no hesitation whatsoever about his movements or how he acts. Just completely nails the presentation of someone who is fully in control. Now, there's a lot we don't know about the Joker. This is basically the beginning of them actually showing this. But I do want to mention one last thing before we move on. It's actually my favorite scene in the trailer. This. Yeah. Because he is desperately trying to smile. Physically trying to force himself to smile. And if you're paying attention, he is actually in the process of crying while he's doing it. Man, I've been there. Anyways. So now we're going to hit some Tumblr questions. While we're hitting some Tumblr questions, I'm going to go ahead and toss up a voot. You want to know how I got these scars? My father was a drinker. Oh yeah, I noticed the laugh in the train too. Trust me. And of course, only in Gotham would businessmen just decide to beat up some random guy because they can. Frickin' Gotham. It's because I secretly am the Joker. Boring. Actually, I've been told many times that I am a very villainous good person. Like, apparently my voice and my mannerisms are things that you'd normally think would be a villain, but I have no interest in actually hurting people. Now, this is mostly just a information gathering kind of a thing here. Just curious of some people's responses. That's what a villain would say. It's true. I don't want to hurt anyone. They make me hurt them. I don't actually want to take over the world. I just have to. This world is imperfect. Wait, hang on. Don't worry, guys. I don't actually want to take over the world. We're cool? We're cool. Okay, I'm not a villain. Now, what's this first question? Damage formula. You're making a new game. Probably an RPG. And you have to decide on how you design your damage formula. What parameters do you consider the most core and the most important for said formula? What do you focus on? Now, to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, most games do things like they'll have attack stats and then stats that affect attack stats. Let's use FF6 as a direct example here. FF6 has strength, which can directly lead to attack power, which is part of the damage formula. Make sense? And the damage formula itself takes into account overall attack power or magic power, whichever is relevant for the specific case. And then it takes into account any multipliers or variables that are tossed on top of that, like relics. And then it takes into account any detriments that are done to the enemy versus, their weaknesses or their defenses or whatever. And then it takes into account their actual defenses, their magic defense and their normal defense. And then it pushes out your number. It's a fairly typical formula. But I was looking at this, I was thinking, is that necessarily the best formula to go with? I mean, it's a very standard formula, and it's very easy to work with, so there's nothing wrong with it. Of course, that's why we need FF13. That's why FF13 is the best Final Fantasy game. Because I love hitting people for 53,000 and their health not even moving. So there's a lot of there's several ways we can actually address this. Now, obviously, we're talking about a turn. In fact, it is specifically a turn-based RPG. Skill in a turn-based RPG usually boils down to knowing your kit and when to use it, as opposed to some more precision of controls or whatever. I kind of like the idea of adding an additional, okay, let me rewind a second. Let me use another example. How many of you guys have played a Mario RPG? Any of them. Literally any of them. Because in Mario RPGs, there's actually another... So in Mario RPGs, the base formula is actually broken down a lot. Your attack power, their defense, and then additional bonuses and variables as applied, both on you and them. That's it. It's actually just a 3-step equation. The thing is, I'm actually lying to you, because there's actually a 4th step to this equation, and that step is player input. And player input is exactly what really makes the Mario RPGs really shine, in my opinion. Now, we'll discuss this when we get to the Mario RPG lore run in much greater depth, but there's a lot of ways to think of this both too much and too little. For example, in Super Mario RPG, there are two types of timed hits, and that's it. There's hitting it right, and then there's hitting it perfect, and that's it. In, say, Mario and Luigi Dream Adventure, whatever, Mario and Luigi 4, I believe that is, there's basically like a much larger gradient of success that you can have while doing the Luigination attacks, and that can determine how much, that can basically actually nerf your overall damage from what the default is, and then get to like what normal damage is, and there's a large gradient of doing additionally more damage on top of that, which goes up quite a ways up based on how well you do the inputs. Because it's basically an entire mini-game of doing inputs on some of those attacks. They deserve to die, Johnny. Anyways, so... now, if I'm being honest, I kind of like that idea, because if you look at the code of the Mario RPGs, we'll use Paper Mario as an example, because that's a very simple example. Again, the base code, the base damage formula is really basic. Attack power, defense power, additional variables. That's it. And additional variables are things like temporary buffs, like boost, or reducing if they're actually vulnerable to something. And even in those cases, usually all those do is basically add another step to one of the other variables. For example, if you have boosted attack, all that does is actually give you another attack point. Or if you have boosted defense, it gives them another defense point, and etc., right? So it's still a very, very basic formula. And yet I've never heard anyone complain that the combat in Paper Mario or Paper Mario 2 is very basic or boring, because they do so much with the player input to try and flesh that out. Which, of course, brings me to my overall answer. I would go with that actual concept. I would want to break it down in terms of formula by adding most of the actual input, most of the actual concept to be on you, and exactly how you do the attack. That being said, I do think the Mario & Luigi series fails in one important way. And that is that... well, yeah, the Mario RPGs are turn-based. Boring. Fully turn-based. Not even active time. But the example this questioner gave was basically FF7, which is actually not turn-based. But anyways. So when one thing that I feel the Mario & Luigi series does incorrectly is they don't have a default. They don't have a just use the attack kind of a thing, right? I mentioned earlier that if you do badly on a Luigination, you'll do worse than default damage, but then there's a huge gradient of doing better. In my opinion, on some cases, there really should just be an option to just be like, just do the attack. Just do the attack, and just accept the middle. The D&D equivalent of taking 10, right? That's probably the only thing I would change about that overall concept. Now, that being said, Baron mentioned something twice now, which is something I like the idea of, that the... I hate to keep going to it, but the Mario RPGs have kind of touched on that briefly, but never really done the full extent of, and that's using the terrain to actually matter. The problem is, in order to use the terrain to matter, there's only really two options. You can do what Final Fantasy V does, or you can do what Paper Mario 1 does. Now, let me explain what I mean by that. In Final Fantasy V, every single encounter in the entire game has basically a terrain type attached to it. And that affects a couple of things, but the most obvious thing is the Geomancer. They will use a specific attack based on the terrain type. Now that's cool, and it makes the Geomancer either great or awful, depending on where you're at. Paper Mario has a nice little thing, and I'm going to use a specific example. When you're first fighting the Goomba King, there's a bit where you can actually attack the tree instead of him. Attacking the tree causes the tree to drop these nuts on him and his people, which will basically do more damage than you're actually capable of doing at that point in time. And then in so doing, you can use the terrain to your advantage. Now, I would like to take that base concept, which they never really developed in the Mario RPGs, sadly, and take it even a step further. I would love the ability to... let's say you can actually have your character go sacrifice a turn, for example, to gain the high ground. Go ahead, get the memes out of your way. But I mean literally, like, to just jump up to a higher area. So they are now in a spot where they can't be hit by normal physical attacks because they're too far away. which is also something FF7 touches at. But they can't attack back, but they're at the higher ground, which means they can do more ranged damage, for example. Or maybe it means they could try to get behind the enemy and actually flank the enemy and turn a normal attack into a pincer attack, right? Or something like that. Just little stuff. Now the catch, this is the catch with that, is for that to actually be good, it would have to be manually crafted, which means you would basically have to come up with probably a smattering, 3 or so different... Oh, that's a good example. Dwarves does do that, you're right. 3 or so different types of things you can do on each terrain type in basically the entire game. And then ideally, after having done that, you'd probably want to manually craft specific terrain stuff you can do on a per-fight occasion for the fights you know that are going to happen. Boss battles, story missions, etc., right? FF has actually toyed with this idea several times and never really gone full out. FF7 kind of did it. You remember the elevator fight in Shinra Tower? FF10 barely touched on this idea with regards to using certain characters' dialogue to affect the battle. But Final Fantasy has never actually really gone full out into this concept, just like the Mario RPGs never have. And I really do think that there's some legitimate ideas there that could be really expanded upon. But we're getting a little bit off topic, because this is mostly about the damage formula. But I feel like I've already answered that question. I think the damage formula should actually be really basic, and you should have most of the actual variance on the damage formula be on the player. Knowing which attacks to use when, and doing the inputs well, and setting up the positioning well. That's just my take on that. Now, I want to scroll up a second here, because Aboring actually gave another answer, which I wanted to get to. Aboring said player strength / dexterity times player skill plus weapon material minus enemy resistant and arm material. So, again, only a couple of steps, an addendum to what I was doing. Basically adding in equipment into the equation. Excuse me. And then he also admits the formula he just posted could result in attacks healing a high stat enemy for negative damage if you attack them all severely underleveled, which is true, but there's ways to prevent that if we want to. I mean, there's a way to basically flatten it out so it cannot go below 0, for example. Or we could leave it. Or if you it's a good sign that you're underleveled because you just have to, you're healing the enemy because you're that massively underleveled, then maybe you should go ahead and not be fighting that guy, Of course, that relies on a good way to either bow out of an encounter or to skip an encounter, one of the two. Ah, I know the one you're talking about, Retro. That is a pretty good fight. Strategy and tactics in turn-based RPGs? Well, if I'm being honest, and this is just me thinking, I do think that if we're going to go that way, we should go full tilt and have it be a turn-based, grid-based tactical RPG. I do think we should have more tactics in RPGs, don't mistake me, but I do think that if we're going to go to full strategy, then we should go to full strategy and basically leave the RPG, the standard RPG genre. Go ahead, Cloud of the Stars. I don't know, this is your question. I was going to say, FF6 is the only one that I know off the top of my head. Although I feel like I actually missed a step in FF6's. Hang on a sec. I did miss a step, didn't I? No, actually, I did not actually skip a step. That's funny. Nope, I was wrong. There is one additional step in FF6's. Apparently, FF6 also takes into account your level when it comes to your damage formula. I didn't actually know that off the top of my head. Anyways. So what we got here? Attack plus attack. So it looks like FF7 does the same thing and takes your level into account. That's interesting. That's kind of a weird way to make your level actually matter regardless of other formula. Or other conditions, I should say. Yeah, exactly, Shadow Machine. I mean, I liked the gameplay in that one. And man, I was bashed for liking the gameplay in that one. Anyways, I actually don't think I have anything else to add here. It's an interesting question. I do think, like, okay, so to use a direct example, I do think that they use too much statting when it comes to their formula in the FF series in particular. But part of the reason I think that is because it is my opinion that they lean too heavily on two things when it comes to statting out their damage formulas in the Final Fantasy series. Thing one is way too many things affecting your damage output, which just gets more the further into the series you get. And two is too much variance. Even the formula that Cloud of the Stars just mentioned there for FF7 has a significant variance on how much damage it could do at any given point in time, thanks to some of the RNG involved. I've talked about this before, where an attack can do anywhere from, just off the top of my head, 47 to 250 damage with a given swing. You know, that I feel like I've said this for years. I feel like there is too much variance when it comes to some RPGs' damage formulas. It's one of the reasons I prefer the Mario RPG method, where there is effectively no variance. Zero variance. You know this hit is going to do 5 damage. Unless they have more defense, then it will do 4 damage. You know, I like that. I like consistent damage better. That is just an opinion. That's just an opinion. Hello, Sonic Doctor. Yes, exactly, Pervy one. That's exactly... You got there before I did, I think. Anyways, how many of you guys like Mortal Kombat? Oh, do I have the vote thing up? I don't. What is wrong with me today? There, boop. Magister. So, how many of you guys like Mortal Kombat? Anybody? Please tell me somebody likes Mortal Kombat in chat. Anybody? Nobody? Nobody likes Mortal Kombat? Ah, sadness. Oh my god, Zachariah likes Mortal Kombat. Thank God. Okay, so the question here, this is actually an interesting question to me. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and link the Voot, because no one else is linking it. There we go. So the question is, Ed Boon shows up. It's like, hey, what's up? Your name here? We're out of ideas. We've expended all the palette swap ninjas of both genders, and we've done every fighter we can think of. We want to hire you to make a new Mortal Kombat fighter. So what do you make? Now, I know exactly what my first thought in with this was, but I'm very curious to hear what you guys would do with this. Other than play Stellaris music, obviously. Why wouldn't you play Stellaris music in a Mortal Kombat game? An extraterrestrial? Okay, like what? A Ryu palette swap. No! A comedy fighter. Do we have comedy fighters in Mortal Kombat? I mean, I can't think of any off the top of my head. We've had, like, you know, side characters like Noob Saibot, who turned into something later. Or, I guess Reptile would qualify. A pink ninja. Don't they have one? They do. Rain. Oh, yeah, Meat. That's true. Meat qualifies. I didn't actually think about that one. Oh, nice, a boring. Teleport, 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 teleport. Isn't Mortal Kombat a black comedy? I feel like that depends on the entry. If you actually pay attention to the background lore of Mortal Kombat, it's very messed up. Is Rain... I must be thinking of Ermac, then. Yes, Tazara. Is it Ermac? I can't see this. Ah, there we go. Okay, Ermac, he's kind of red. Although apparently his color varies. Because here he's kind of like orange. And here he's kind of pink. And here he's kind of red. Oh yeah, there's also Mylena, who is pink. Was Katana? No, Katana wasn't pink, was she? Hang on, hang on. Katana, Mortal Kombat. No, Katana's blue. What the hell? Who's the tan ninja? Like, we've got Noob Saibot, and then there's Smoke, That's Rain. That's Sub-Zero. I don't know who the teal one is. That's Reptile. That's Scorpion. That's Ermac. And then there's like a tan one. You're designing a Mortal Kombat character, Hazardous. Tremor? Who the heck is Tremor? Oh, yeah. He is definitely tan. Huh. Then who's the teal one? Hang on, let's look up Chameleon. Yep, nope, that's Chameleon. Okay. I knew all of them except for 2. They really like the default ninja, don't they? Oh, don't give me that job, Tazara. I don't want that job. Wow, that's hysterical. Now, what's funny is I caught myself because I was about to say, wait a minute, where's the other Sub-Zero? Then I was like, oh yeah, that's Noob. Right. Mortal Kombat does actually have a decent amount of lore to it, weirdly enough. In fact, that reminds me of a good joke. Hang on a second. Let me see if I can find the joke really quick. Give me just a moment. Hi, Zeiss. Make sure you voot. Yeah, I know, Doctor Who. Yeah, Noob Saibot is Sub-Zero, as in the very evil person. And then Sub-Zero, the current Sub-Zero is actually the decent one. Here it is. The joke is, your soul is mine, for I am Shang Tsung. And then a person pops up and says, wait a minute, he's still young looking? That didn't happen until Mortal Kombat 2. This movie's been on for 30 seconds, and already they've contradicted Tobias' original story 12 times. And then a non-Mortal Kombat fan pops up, this game had a story? Probably, yeah, Baron. Anyways, getting back to the point. So I like several of the ideas you guys have said. We had a light being of doom. I like a Boring's portal dude. Yeah, I like that Doctor Strange approach. Daughter of Johnny Cage. I will stab you. A Shoto type character? Oh, gotcha, Mihawk. I understand. And then Baron said a being of pure light, which is held in place by crystals. Doctor Who says an alien. You didn't tell me anything about his fight style, though. The Grandmaster of Lin Kuei. Lin Kuei. Lin Kuei? I've heard them pronounce it both ways. I am not a ninja. I am Lin Kuei. Zombie Liu Kang. Oh my god, dude, really? Yes, I know that, Hazardous. That's the joke. Oh my god, dude. I do know Mortal Kombat lore, guys. But no, okay. So what I would do... I'm actually kind of torn on this. But any of you guys ever played Dissidia or Dissidia Duodecim? You know, the good Dissidias? Not the bad Dissidia that sucks. That's gross, Malachor. Why would you want to do that? I saw the first Mortal Kombat movie in theaters, Tazara. With my mother. Jax's arms reanimated. Just the arms. No, they're like, they crawl around on the ground, so it's really hard to hit them. Anyways. So what I would want to do, and I know we've already had 3 of these guys, but honestly, I just really like the idea of another Shao Kahn character. Could I answer what am I willing to lose everything for? Yeah, I totally could. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but I could. Quan Chi's head. Yes, Shiva is a Shao Kahn. Goro is probably the most famous Shao Kahn. There's also that one dude. I don't actually remember his name. There's another one. Kintaro? Is that it? Yeah, it was Kintaro. I was right. No, not the Centaur. The forearms guys. Now, the way I would do this, getting back to my Dissidia reference, I like the idea of making it so that rather than just making it play like Shiva, which was never all that fun if I'm being honest, make it so that you can effectively have based on how you do your inputs, you can decide whether or not your attacks have an upper focus or a lower focus or neither. No, Goro was in the first movie, Adam. I don't think Kintaro was in anything. Or not Kintaro. Oh god, what's the centaur's name? Shoot. Hang on. Mortal Kombat Centaur. I don't remember his name. All kind of blurring for me. Motaro, that's it, Motaro. I don't think Motaro was in the movie. I could be wrong about that. I'm apparently wrong about that. Wow, Motaro was actually in Mortal Kombat 2? Seriously? Also, who's the Collector? I don't know who that one is. For once, you have someone I don't know who's about. Oh, it's because he was in 11. That's why. Yeah, I don't really know 11. I actually saw Annihilation in the theaters. It's because I liked the first film, and Mom wanted to see, you know, the second film with me, and then we saw the second film in the theaters. Anyways, the idea is basically that all of his moves have 3 forms to them, based on how you do them. Standard, which is the weakest form, but also is the easiest to connect with the enemy. So the most, I forget the term, but the most hurt box, I guess is the term I want to think of. And then there's the upper form, emphasizing the upper arms, which will be easier to hit things in the upper range, and will do more damage if it connects, but will basically be very easy to dodge if they go under it. And then the lower form of attacks, which use the lower 2 arms and do the exact same thing in the opposite direction. In other words, the idea is if you're playing against a player who is playing this character, the Goro character, then they will be able to Shokan character. They'll be able to decide at a moment's notice where they're emphasizing their attack strengths, upper or lower. And I just think that's an interesting concept. That's all. So that's probably what I would do with the character. And of course, I like the Shokan as a race. As far as story-wise, I'd probably make it someone who is just really sick of all of this crap. Like, really? Do we have to keep putting up with this crap? I'm gonna go kill Shao Kahn. I'll be right back. As I mentioned just a few minutes ago, Adam, yes, she saw the first movie with me in the theaters. Have I ever told you guys why Mom was so interested in seeing Mortal Kombat of all games, or of all movies, with me in the theaters? The answer to this question is Christopher Lambert. Anyways. That's also why we got into the Highlander series, consequently. And then we immediately got out of the TV show for fairly obvious reasons. Yeah, no, that's kind of the idea, Zachariah. Just someone who's just like, really? Really? And now the Elder Gods will try to pull forth the demon energy from the Netherrealm. And this guy's just like, guys, seriously. Stop it. The TV show is probably good. I've never seen it because it didn't have Christopher Lambert in it. I did see the movie, which was basically the TV show movie. So how would I emphasize the dragon part of the Shokan? Honestly, I'd probably make most of his actual special moves, his attack moves, variations on... Oh, what's his name? Hang on. I'm sorry, I don't remember his name. I gotta look it up. No, 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 no. Is it Onaga? Is that him? That's him. I would have his special moves be some things that basically call back to Onaga and a lot of his attacks and his special attacks. Obviously less powerful, not as overbrokenly stupid, but, similar concepts. I couldn't think of his damn name. I should have just said the Dragon King. Someone would have probably gotten there before I did. Hey, Cord. You're fired! Also, there's a Voot. Don't forget to Voot. Now, bonus question. You have to make a palette swap of a character in Mortal Kombat. Whom do you palette swap? Now, my obvious answer here is Scorpion. I think there's still a few colors we haven't taken yet in the ninja palette. So I'm thinking pink ninja, white ninja, mauve ninja. But all of that's just ridiculous. No, I'd actually do Rainbow Ninja. Seriously, just all the colors are just kind of doing this thing constantly. He actually has no real attacks. He just blinds the actual player playing the game. No, red's taken by Ermac. Chameleon doesn't count, Malachor. Disco Ninja. Yeah, there you go. His special attack is he just goes, and then blinding lights hit the screen, and you can't even tell what you're looking at. Camo Ninja. Oh, God. So, some of you may remember, I forget if it's actually Mortal Kombat 1 or Mortal Kombat 2. But in Mortal Kombat 1 and Mortal Kombat 2, one of the games, there was a way to basically bug the game out to be able to play as either Reptile or Noob Saibot. I forget which. But either way, it was bugged because it wasn't really supposed to be done in the arcade. So instead of playing a character, there was no graphic there. You could see the little shadow where your character was standing, and that's it. So just kind of guess the rest. So there you go. That's our palette swap for Scorpion. Chameleon doesn't count. Okay, fine. Chameleon counts. Fine. Okay, in that case, we'll go with Chartreuse. No, I like Disco Ninja better. Green screen Scorpion. Where is he? I'm thinking Disco Ninja. Salmon Ninja? Actually, do we have... Yeah, we do. Never mind. I'm actually looking around my desk at colors here. We have that color, we have that color, we have that color. Oh, that would be hysterical, Zechariah. Like, if you play as Kenshi, the other character does, the blinding attack and nothing happens. Just above 0. Well, what color is he? Gold Ninja. He's different than Scorpion because he glitters. Yeah. There's just... Oh, dude. We could do like a what's it called? Marvel versus Capcom kind of thing, where you could swap in and out other characters. So Disco Ninja's like, oh, and it stuns the enemy, and as in addition to the stun, it also swaps in your other fighter. But the other fighter has to be one of the ninjas. Like Disco Ninja will not, you cannot select him and not select one of the other ninjas or Lin Kuei. I mean, Mortal Kombat vs. DC was actually pretty fun. I played that one. And then Kratos shows up. No, we need a Kratos... remember, it has to be a palette swap. So it'll be green Kratos. I don't know. Well, that sounds extremely cool, Doctor Who. But how is it a palette swap? It has to be a palette swap. It is a Mortal Kombat tradition to have... Seriously, look up all the different ninjas there are in Mortal Kombat at this point in time. There were 2 I didn't even know about. With the yellow... A Kirby palette swap? Don't we already have several of those? Wait, I've got it. It'll be a Johnny Cash palette swap, and his name will be Terry Crews. He attacks by flexing. I'm sorry, I'm done. Anyways, let's move on here. How many of you guys like Lord of the Rings? Anybody? I hope at least someone likes more Lord of the Rings, because I gotta be honest, I'm asking this question on camera because this one completely stumped me. So I'm not even gonna answer this one. This is all on you guys. And they instantly, like, fall in love, Doctor Who. Ooh, that's it. How about a platypus? No, Yeah, I know, Zachariah. The whole Kratos palette swap thing. We need a green Kratos. So Morgoth, okay? I'm not even going to explain who Morgoth is, because if I have to, then you're not the person this is being directed at. The question was, quite specifically, if you had to describe what Morgoth looks like, how would you describe it? Note, I know he can take on multiple forms, so if you want to describe more than one, then go for it. I gotta admit, this is actually like a 2-week-old question. This has absolutely stumped me. Like, I couldn't come up with anything. This is why I'm just kind of tossing this to you guys. Yeah, you see the problem, Justin? How do you describe Morgoth? Like, I had a couple of ideas, but then I realized I was just describing some of my own actual characters from the Imperium, so I stopped doing that. So, a big, spiky Sauron. Okay. Darkness with eyes. I like that. Bald, 6 feet tall, black robe. Wait a minute. Morgoth. Yeah, you see the problem, Geludo. I mean, we have to show him some case. Like, we're doing a Silmarillion movie. We have to make him shown, right? The question is, describe visually Morgoth. Beautiful elf twisted from years of depravity. So a Dark Eldar, then. Sorry. I could see that. I actually, if I could be so bold, I really like how Sauron looked in the Shadow of War and Shadow of Mordor games as an elf. Like, I really think they did a good job with making him appear just as cold and awful as he should there as an elf. Just my take on that. Something that casts a shadow in pitch black darkness and is the largest thing you've ever seen, even though he's standing in the same room as you. I kind of like that idea, you know, that he appears larger than he is. Or more accurately, it'd probably be more accurate to say that he appears smaller than he is, but you get the impression that he's larger. The Darkness in the Darkness games, I could see that. Those are fun games. Well, that was a fun game. I only played one of them. Christopher Waltz. It's better than Christopher Walken. Tizara says orange, red, and purple ball of energy that can appear as an animal, a natural, or a warrior form. Who would play Morgoth? I would. No, sorry. Obviously it'd be Mark Strong. Darth Bandon. Morgoth walks in. Very awkward walk animation. The World's Serpent. I admit, I like the idea of basically, so assuming we're doing a movie, of basically having like 15 or more different actors all playing him. Maybe have one actor do all of the voices, but visually speaking, having quite a few different actors who all present his visual form, depending on who he's talking to, basically. And each one appears completely differently based on whom he's talking to. Yeah, exactly. Same voice, different forms. don't remember what Vichy looks like off the top of my head. Other than Valkorion, obviously. Wow, he actually looks real boring before he's Valkorion. I suppose that makes sense. No, he just looks like boring. He's just a dude who has red eyes and kind of chalky skin. I probably wouldn't do that hazardous. There's a lot of actual audio mixing issues with making that work and making it sound good. Not every pitch works with every other pitch. Now, at best, I might do maybe a couple of actors, depending on who exactly he's talking to. So, in other words, like some of them blending over each other rather than all 15 at the same time. Have you ever played ActRaiser 2, Zechariah, by chance? I know that's a weird tangent, but I swear I'm going somewhere with it. I mean, aren't they making another stab at doing a Dune movie? I feel like I've seen something about that. How would Sauron be? Honestly, I stand by my statement. Let's just make him the super creepy, cold elf-looking thing. Yeah, so I was right there doing a new Dune movie. I'm not sure if it'll be any good. Adam Sandler. Hey, guys. So the reason I ask is if you remember the last boss of ActRaiser 2 is basically, you know, the guy frozen in the lake, right? Because that's immediately what came to my mind when you mentioned that. Maybe not quite as... but, you know, something in that same direction. I do like the cold motif. I also like the idea of several of the ideas you guys have mentioned, like making it so that... So, okay, this is going to sound weird, but I know several of you said casting shadows and all that fun stuff. I actually like the idea of doing the exact opposite more. That he literally does not have a shadow. That he's just... No, hazardous. That he's just there, but he's kind of not there. Because it's one of those little visual shorthand things you can do that most people won't really consciously recognize, but will just showcase that they're off. You know what I mean? It's like not blinking, which is another thing I'd do, consequently. I'd make it so Morgoth doesn't blink. Which, again, is a very minor thing, but is the kind of thing that people will pick up on, subconsciously or otherwise, to notice that there's just something off there, right? I also like the idea that any room he's in, however, gets a little bit darker. Now, I can actually tell you exactly how that would look, because they already did that effect in the Lord of the Rings films. You remember in Fellowship of the Ring, when Gandalf says, "Bilbo Baggins, I am not some cheap conjurer of tricks," you know, that kind of a thing, right? So, I like the idea that wherever he is just noticeably darker. More downcast, effectively, visually. No blinking. No shadows. Yeah, I know, right, Justin? God. But yeah, this is you can see why I wanted to ask this question on stream. This is a fascinating question. It stumped the hell out of me for weeks. 2 weeks now. How would his eye color look? Completely normal. Like brown. The most average eye color that exists. I don't mean that as an insult, actually. I love brown eye color. But whenever you describe someone's eyes, if you want them to sound, you know, distended or whatever, you describe them as blue or green or yellow or black or whatever. No. Brown eyes. Just normal. Morgoth is not in the movies. I think they reference him once in Fellowship. When he's talking to the Balrog, the Durin's Bane, he references Morgoth once. I like that, Plutonia. There's some things you could do visually to kind of showcase the idea that as you walk towards him, it's just like, whew. But when you walk away, it's like, Like, that you could use some camera tricks to make that work. Oh, you're right. Legolas references him, right? You're right. I remember that. A Balrog and Morgoth. So 2 references in Fellowship, both regarding the Balrog, the Durin's Bane. Exactly, a boring. Kate Blanchett's character always looked terrifying in the films, which is, of course, the point. And in fact, it was actually one of my favorite parts of Battle of the Five Armies was when she just unleashed. How would the Orcs play? I don't know what I'd do with the Orcs, if I'm being completely honest. I'd have to really think about it. If you ever wanted to turn the Silmarillion into a film, or films, it would take some thought. Let me tell you what. Part of the problem, in my opinion at least, is the Silmarillion doesn't really follow a cohesive narrative, because it wasn't designed to. If we were turning them into films, see you around, Braywin, it is my opinion that the most likely thing to do would be basically to found the films on at least 2 overall axis points. One is the conflict with Morgoth, and the other is the establishment of the status quo for the world. One of the two. And by one of the two, I mean both. I don't know why I said one of the two. Probably the establishment of the world and then the conflict with Morgoth, even though I know that's not really the order. I do firmly think that we shouldn't do movies on the Silmarillion. In fact, I plan to talk about that later today. Seriously, it's part of my Shazam discussion. See, this is why we need infinite money. No, we need money. No, what we need to do is budget the overall finances of the world better so money is more available to do creative projects like a Silmarillion show. Which probably wouldn't sell that well, but who cares? Anyways. Moving on. Anyways, I think that's a fairly decent answer to that question. Let's move on to the next question, which is dreams. Now, this is a weird one. This actually came in via not Tumblr. No, Justin, don't leave us, at least until we get there. How many of you guys like Star Trek? Okay, hear me out. So let me pull up the question here because this is kind of over here. Nobody likes Star Trek. We all know this. Why does this keep splitting up WKC's messages to me? That's actually kind of irritating. Here we go. Okay. So let's assume that we're in Star Trek. Now, let's also assume that it becomes legal to effectively record your own dreams. And imagine you were capable of editing your own dream. I'm saying this wrong. Imagine you had a dream about, I don't know, Jurassic Park, for example. And actually, in real life, we're getting to the point of dream recordings. That's a real thing. Which is kind of terrifying. Yes and no, hazardous. But imagine in Star Trek that you could record your dreams and then basically dump them onto a holodeck and edit them and make them playable, right? Now, you're probably thinking, okay, cool. The question comes in from... I brought this up during one of my discussions on DS9. It was the only thing I had to discuss in that episode. It was the episode where Quark... I don't remember the name of the episode. It was the episode where Quark was trying to record holodeck footage of Kira in order to make a holodeck sex toy out of her. And I don't even remember what the A plot was, because that was actually the B plot of that episode. I remember the A plot was awful, whatever it was. But I had a lot to say about the B plot, because it was a fascinating concept. And there was actually a lot of really weird things to think about there. You know, legally speaking, morally speaking, in terms of the base technology. Now, several people on the comments for that video actually pointed out that someone who is a member of any kind of military organization probably has enough detail available on them to just recreate them on the holodeck just like that, as Voyager showed several times. So Quark probably shouldn't have had issues with that regardless, but getting back to my point. What if you had the ability to dream an alternate version of Jurassic Park and you wanted to replay that in the holodeck? Now, at what point would that be considered acceptable? Like, how would the legal rights of that happen? Let me put this to you another way. In real life right now, I could write a fanfic of Jurassic Park, right? But what if I made a fan film based on Jurassic Park? What if I made a fan game based on Jurassic Park? The more, I guess depth is the word I want to use here, that is put into a fan project, the more it is likely that the legal departments tend to get involved. And things tend to kind of start to have problems, right? And companies get more interested in stopping you and being evil and stopping you. I just want to mention both of those because there is evil involved and then there's stopping you involved, because there's copyright and then there's copy wrong. But anyways, getting back to the point. Now, obviously you could monetize it. That's a duh. But the question is, how allowed would that be in general? Because the other question is, how do you police that? One of the fascinating things about the holodeck is that it is insanely user-friendly. Right now, if you wanted to make a Jurassic Park game, you would require writers, you would require graphics designers, you would require programmers, multiple programmers probably, and an understanding of code and code logic. You would have to have bug testers, you would have to have some kind of ability to push it out onto whatever platform you wanted to, probably PC. It would take a lot of time and effort and work. If you walk on board a holodeck, you could make that game in an afternoon. It is insane how user-friendly the holodeck is. It is, in my opinion, one of its actual greatest features. When you could just say, make a character here, make them human, give them decent clothing. No. Make the shirt gray, okay? Make the hair 5 inches longer, all right? Now make the hair purple. You know, you could just do that. You just tell the computer what to do as precisely or generically as you want to. Which, again, leads to the overall problem of reasonability, morality, ethics, and, of course, legality. Now, obviously, the legal issues are surprisingly cut and dry. But, again, how exactly would you deal with this from an ethical perspective or a personal perspective? Would you want to be able to record your dreams and then edit them and turn them into a holofilm or a hologame? Hologame is my own term, by the way, because for some reason people never seem to think that holodeck is the perfect video game device, but whatever. It could only exist in a society that has seemingly eschewed financial gain, couldn't it? A boring. Let's be honest, the holodeck was a real-life invention, not a in-lore invention. I've talked about this before in my TNG ruminations. Can you force people into the stream recorder? I mean, can you force anyone to do anything? I can make a Shadowrun reference here, but I'm not going to because it's gross. It's an interesting concept, though. I will admit I've had several story ideas in dreams before. Let me give you one example I've actually talked about on stream before. Basically, I want you to imagine a perfect merger of Warcraft and Pirates of the Caribbean. I know it sounds weird, but it was actually a fascinating idea, and I actually kind of want to do a story idea similar to this someday. The idea was it was basically the characters and concepts, the factions, the politics of Warcraft, but instead of being set on Azeroth, it was being set within the Pirates of the Caribbean setting. So the power level was dropped down substantially, and it was more about naval-based stuff rather than anything else. It does, doesn't it, Boring? We all know the British are secretly orcs. Or the orcs are secretly British? Yeah. But my point is, from my perspective, it would absolutely be fascinating to be able to take that and tinker with it. And mess with it and try to turn it into something, right? But again, we also have the problem with other people trying to, as Larian pointed out, trying to force these recorders onto people. Or even if it's not forcing, imagine if you could sell the rights to your dream. Like, imagine if you could make a little bit extra money every night if you just attach this thing to your brain when you go to sleep. I'm pretty sure a lot of people would take that deal. Whether they even want to or not, because they could use the extra money. Right? You see the ideas here? In short, what I'm trying to say overall here is that as much as I think the idea itself is fascinating, and I do, I'm pretty much against it overall, because even though there are a couple of concepts that would be interesting and worthwhile doing, those concepts don't really necessarily need to involve dreams or scanning someone's brain. Instead, I would actually be more okay with just walking onto a holodeck and trying to come up with an idea, right? Also, this is probably a good time to mention that there's a... Was it a movie? There's something about a guy, about a dystopian society, where you have to physically do work in order to generate power, and that gives you like an allotance of how much you can have per day. And that, and so if you work out a whole lot, you'll get more money, that kind of a thing. And that was a very, very creepy, horrifying future, and I don't want that for dreams, so let's just skip that. Because, was it Black Mirror? Okay, it was a Black Mirror. So it was an episode then. But, yeah, imagine if, as a nature of selling your dreams, you basically give whatever publisher you're selling these dreams to carte blanche to do with it what they want. So let's say all of a sudden it becomes very popular to revisit your dream of insert embarrassing thing here. Or insert horrifying thing here. I don't know about you guys, but I tend to have more nightmares than dreams. And there are several of those that I don't really think I want to be out in the world. You know? That's actually something I brought up in that episode of DS9 Aborn. That's one of the reasons why I connected that to this discussion point. Because at what point is it okay to do that, basically? Morally, ethically, legally. By the way, just to clarify really quick, some people probably are wondering why I keep saying morals and ethics. Morals is the individual, ethics is the society. Just getting that clear. Ah, but you can sign away intellectual property. Legally speaking, it is entirely possible to sell legal property or intellectual property. It's actually one of the reasons I tend to be a little cagey about some of my own stuff. I've already had some of my stuff stolen in the past. I've already dealt with that. Or ask, let me use a direct example. Who owns Kingdom Hearts? The creative team who created it? Or Disney? Yeah. Point being, let's not have this happen. Let's see. What's my next thing? Are we done? We're done. We're done with questions. Woo! So before we move on to our spoilers discussion, I want to talk about the Imperium. Now, there's been a poll up here. I'm going to go and pull up that poll now, because I've been deliberately ignoring it. That's actually more of a spread than I was expecting. Although only 56 votes. Let me get a timestamp here. Hang on. How many of you know what the Imperium is? Let me rephrase that question. How many of you don't know what the Imperium is, and as a consequence are either wondering what it is or have some idea of what it is? I really should ask in the negative here, more than anything else. As Doctor Who and Geludo pointed out, it is, in fact, the Loreverse. It is my setting. And as Zachariah points out, there's also the Imperium of Man over in Warhammer 40k. Unfortunately, I never really came up with the term Imperium. I know that sounds like a strange statement, but I didn't. It was actually other people who termed it the Imperium. I actually didn't have a name for the setting until other people started calling it the Imperium. And I just kind of kept doing it. That would be fun, Ice Tray. Oh, that's true. There's also an Imperium in Dune. I actually forgot about that. The Imperium is the name for my setting. I've been debating renaming it. Again, like I said, I didn't name it to begin with. My sister is... Is this April? Yeah. My sister is 2 months away from being done with her schooling finally and going back to merely working full-time rather than, you know, working full-time and also going to school full-time. So hopefully her life will be a lot less hectic in 2 months. She's a little burnt out, though. The Imperium is my setting. I've often referred to it as continuity of the setting because the entire point is that it is all within one cohesive concept. You know, like... Well, actually, I'm not even sure of another example off the top of my head, to be completely honest. Babylon 5, I suppose. But the entire idea is that when I was younger, everything I wrote, because I've been interested in writing since I was very young, I wanted to connect to each other. Now, I've told the whole story of this before. I'm not going to bore you with it now. But the idea is I thought it would be interesting, even as a kid, to make them connect to each other. Because even as a child, continuity mattered to me. Even as a child, it always bothered me when a television show would ignore events of a previous episode, or when a book wouldn't acknowledge something that happened in a previous book, or when a game would not even recognize something that happened in a previous game. Right? It used to drive me batty as a kid. Now, as a kid, I didn't understand. I legitimately thought, this is making fun of myself here, I legitimately thought that I was just missing something. Like maybe there's an episode I wasn't seeing. Or maybe they knew something I didn't, and I'm just an idiot. As a child, I didn't recognize the fact that a lot of creators don't really lean too heavily on the continuity button. But I didn't want that. I wanted to lean heavily on the continuity button, because continuity matters to me generally more than anything else when it comes to fiction. Hence, the idea of connecting all of my written stories together. And that just kind of grew from there, and I'll just summarize over the next several years as I kind of developed into eventually getting to high school. By the time I hit high school, I had actually started codifying each of my stories so that they all existed within one cohesive timeline. And then I kind of just turned that into what is now referred to as the Imperium. And yeah, the Stephen King thing, although I didn't know it at the time, is actually quite similar, what he does with his overall works. Because, to my knowledge, everything Stephen King has written is within the same overall verse. I could be wrong about that. This is also, some people have called this the Loreverse, because I know that's a common way to call it. We've got the Nomura-verse they're developing. There's, that kind of a thing. Do all the stories work together? Not directly, no, because all the stories are set within the same setting. So it is entirely possible to have one story that is set within the same setting that has absolutely nothing to do with the other stories. After all, if you were to do a story right now set in Moscow, about some kid who's down on his luck and is trying to get some money going. And then you have a story set at the exact same time, set over there in Mumbai, which is about someone who is trying to take over the world or whatever. Those stories are in the same continuity and acknowledge the same rules, but don't really have any direct connections to each other. Make sense? Now... Interesting or boring? I didn't actually know that. Go ahead, Ice Tray. Anyway, so that is what the Imperium is. It is my setting. I call it continuity of the setting for obvious reasons. Now, if I asked this question some time ago... Yeah, I've heard about the Pixar theory, Fuzzy Duck. If I asked this question some time ago, I'm pretty sure most people would say, oh, it's your fan fiction setting. That's kind of because of a misinterpretation / misrepresentation, and that's mostly on my fault on that one, to go ahead and be honest about it. See, the problem is I've talked about several Bastion agents, and most of you don't come to me for my stuff. You come to me for other stuff. You come to me for covering Mass Effect or Dragon Age or whatever. And so I talked about how I liked to write my own characters into that, and in so doing kind of build those into the overall Imperium. Right? I'm pretty sure the first acknowledgement that most people had of the Imperium within my work was Zaydenra Shepard over in Mass Effect, who I discussed extensively. Now, the problem is that's not quite true, because the fanfiction stuff has always kind of been mentally divorced from the rest of the stuff in my mind. And as I've gotten older and realized that I actually want to do stuff with the Imperium, as in actually produce and publish stuff, and hopefully get to the point where I can start making games within it, and release audiobooks and whatever else, I've had to basically completely divorce the fanfiction stuff, because I have to. I can't talk about... I can't do the Dragon Age thing, because I don't own Dragon Age. This is funny, because this is actually directly related to the topic we were just talking about with the holodecks and thing. Because I can't do that. I don't own Dragon Age. I don't own BioWare. I don't own EA yet. And so as a consequence, I've had to sort of completely divorce all of the fanfiction elements from the rest of it, instead focusing entirely on my own stuff, which is something I've been doing for the better part of the last 4 years now. Which is why I wanted to ask that question. How interested are you guys in my setting? Which has nothing to do with Mass Effect, which has nothing to do with Dragon Age. It's just the setting that I've been building since I was a kid. Because it's still there, it's just, it's divorced from the other bits. The Bastion's still there. Noxaith is still there. Zaydenra is still there. It's just she's never been to Mass Effect, because it doesn't exist. Which is going to involve some reworking, but I've already done a lot of that reworking personally. Hence the question. Now, part of the reason I ask this is because I've always wanted to do more with the Imperium. Of course I do. It's my own setting, right? But obviously I just don't have a lot of time in my life. And so one of the things that I was thinking... Hang on, let me read what you guys are saying. Yes, absolutely, SJ, because it is actually much harder than it sounds to keep things contiguous. Like, it's actually legitimately difficult to do that at a certain point. Every now and again, and this has not happened that frequently, but every now and again someone will be like, well, what about such and such? And I'm like, oh god, you're right. I didn't even think about such and such. Holy crap. Yes, Doctor Who, consequently. That is actually what the Imperium Mainliner project is, other people adding to it. So far, the things that have been codified are from Savacom and from Emperor Valerian, two viewers who I've actually already released videos, and me reading the short stories that they've written within the Imperium. So those are now canon, so to speak. Now, obviously, like I said, I just don't have a lot of time. Right now, I can't even do the mini-nations because I don't have time for that. But one of the things I do want to do is I want to do more Imperium stuff. So I've been trying to think of some way to fit that into the cracks in time I have. Now, what I came up with was an idea to basically do a little bit of just like a snippet, like a 3-minute little blurb talking about the Imperium and about concepts or ideas, or maybe doing some like a series of little blurbs talking about a sequence of events, or covering the War of Annihilation, or maybe discussing the events of the Arisal, or exactly what led to the border skirmishes with the Vorsat, that kind of a thing. Just little ideas like that. But of course, I wanted to ask if you guys were interested in that first, because this is still my job. I have to admit, I am obviously interested in doing this, but if you aren't, you're my customers. You're the ones paying for my bills, It's kind of how that works. So that's why I'm asking you guys your interest. Now, I had 2 ideas of how to actually implement this. One is basically little audio blips. I'd love to do video blips, but that would involve some kind of animation. And I don't have the time or skill to do animation, either pixel art or drawn, respectively. So I can't do that. I basically lack the ability to do some kind of visual presentation of these things. But I could do audio. In fact, I already know exactly how I would do it, because I've already actually kind of done a thing where I was discussing the initiation of the Primus situation, and I did like a really brief audio blurb. And I actually sat down and I actually, wrote a script, and I read it out loud, and there you go, boom. the history of such and such, part 1, something like that. And I could release that on a semi-regular basis. Or I suppose, because these are not mutually exclusive, I could also go ahead and talk about it here during Loreweek, as like at the end of each section. I'm going to laugh if that's a donation for me never to talk about the Imperium again. I really am. Hang on. What do you mean, Mike Romano? Yep. Nerd Factor says, I donate this to ensure that you never speak about the Imperium again. I hate the Imperium. I hate you. I hate your stupid, ugly, dirty face. I hate how crap you are. I hate the fact that you can't grow your hair out, and you suck. I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. Sincerely, Nerd Factor. P.S. I hate you. Okay. He just said, it's his exact words. He confirms. Yes and no, Magister. I want to do more with it. I do want to someday publish with the Imperium, or whatever I'm going to call it. I'm probably going to come up with another name, if I'm just being completely honest. As I've already mentioned, the Imperium is kind of a generic term. Although, funny story, I was talking to Third about this just last night when we were going to see Shazam, and he was like, "Okay, I have an idea. What's the Latin word for Imperium?" And I'm like, "Good idea. I'll look it up." Did you know the Latin word for Imperium is Imperium? I'm serious. Thank you very, very much, Nerd Factor. As ever, I am much appreciative of your support. Thank you very, very much. I don't know what else to say. For those of you curious, what he actually said was just the word Imperium. That's literally his only donation comment. I will assume that means that not only are you interested, but you are demonstrating factual interest via financial support. So let me just say thank you, Nerd Factor, for showing me that at least one person out there is legitimately financially interested in me doing something with this. If you'd like to put that towards something else, that's okay. I would understand that completely. But I need to come up with another term. I think I really do, and I think I need to do that earlier rather than later. I need to rip the Band-Aid off on that one. So, any ideas? But yeah, no, I'm thinking of doing the audiobook thing. Now, Mike Romano mentioned the barrier to entry, and that's a very valid point. It is absolutely a very valid point. And you're right, I should start from zero. Now, the good news is I have done a fairly large amount of work about the history of the Imperium. In fact, so I asked on Twitter last night, I believe it was, if anybody had any thoughts or questions for the possibility of going with this. And several people asked some extremely basic questions, showing a general lack of interest, of understanding of the setting. For example, what's the political structure of the various factions within the Imperium itself? Which is a fairly basic question, which, is in other words, starting from zero, like you said, Mike Romano, is absolutely where I would have to do this. How much time has passed in the setting? It's about 430 years, by the way. And how much of the history have I written down? Not all of it. I've written down, a chunk of history here and there. I actually have a literal calendar program that I bought that lets you set up custom calendars, and I've been using that to keep track of literally the dates and times and stuff because, continuity, right? What are the different species? There's quite a few. I've written down a list of those as well. All kinds of fun stuff like that. Hence the idea of going ahead and basically doing as Mike Romano says, starting from zero and really just kind of discussing the real basics before getting into the more in-depth details. Now, the catch there, and this is part of why I asked this question both in Discord. Nobody responded in Discord. That made me sad. I asked this question in Discord, and I am asking this question here, and I asked this question on Twitter. One of the reasons I wanted thoughts and ideas about questions is I don't really know where to start. I've been writing the Imperium since I was in high school. That's 25 years ago. I'm not really 100% sure where to start. Now, I could tell you about species, for example. I've actually got a list right here. Humans, Azimdi, Devourers, Elves, Trolls, Dwarves, Orcs, Bajari, Ogres, Tigians, Gnomes, Goblins, Harpies, Kobolds, and Tethans, Piltoth, Lamias, Onurians, Shrezi, Dragons, Vorsat, Luvari, Zrej, Jevkin, Neshari, Gnolls, Bemarok, the Bemarok, yes, they're different, the Mijians, the Scions, some of you should know about those ones, Elementals, Titans, Vorash, Madeira, Frenoy, and Lord Elves. Just off the top of my head there. No, I'm kidding. Obviously, I had to look at the list in order to go down those. But you get the idea. You see, it doesn't work that way, Disco. A Tigian is... It's actually... it's pronounced both Tigian or Tygian. But a Tigian or a Tygian is a very large, somewhat... partially elemental creature, which has some of the structure of their makeup. It literally has rock in it, so they're effectively stone giants. But they're not really stone giants. They're stone giants, basically. Let's just go ahead and call that. I would like to say that they're not stone giants, but they are. I've developed a whole culture centered around the idea of a species that has difficulty with sensation because of the fact that thanks to their makeup of their body and their form, that they quite literally physically do not have the same tangible sensation that other species do. No, it's actually TY, but otherwise you got it very close, Ice Tray. I'm really big on culture. You guys know me. I love developing the culture. The trolls, for example, they have another problem where they tend to fixate on extremities because, and by extremities I mean extremes, because they have the naturally regenerative nature that is usually endemic of trolls. And so as a consequence, trolls don't feel things unless they feel things to a severity. They are basically hedonists in a cultural sense. So the kind of pain that would be required to even register for a troll has to be fairly severe, but the same thing goes in the reverse. That's one of the reasons, for example, to go with food, trolls tend to love very spicy food. The kind of stuff that would actually probably literally give us, in real life, actual burns is the kind of thing that they find to be a delicacy. And it's kind of a sign of the fact that you don't have any kind of particular wealth or power amongst troll society if you were someone who could only afford bland-tasting food, for example. No Minotaurs. There are lycanthropes, but they're kind of a constructed race. There are centaurs, yes. Why elves and orcs? I don't have a good answer to that question. The main core theme of my setting, well, honestly, it's continuity. Yeah, exactly, Micromano. The Scoville units. That's a good way to put that. I mean, obviously, does the Fel exist in the Imperium? I don't think so, no. For the most part, there's the 8 elements, obviously. And then there's the nature of magic itself. Then there's magitech, obviously. And then there's technology. Oh, by the way, that's another thing. I should probably point this out. I've said for years, and this is still firmly my opinion, that fantasy and science fiction are not mutually exclusive. So this is a fantasy sci-fi setting. It has magic and spaceships. Yes, 8 elements: fire, earth, white. Come on, Laura. Hang on, I'll do the wheel. So it's light, fire, life, earth, shadow, or darkness rather, and then water, spatial, and air. There we go. Sorry, I had to do the actual circle to get that one. Yes, Justin. This is a galactic setting. It is set within a singular galaxy. I have shrunk it down to a single galaxy. It used to be 4. I shrank it down because, honestly, 4 was just too much. Doctor Who asks, are there any races similar to the Protoss? I suppose the Azimdi technically qualify, but not really. There is another one, though. The Vorsat probably qualify as kind of Protoss-y. But no, that's still not quite right. I suppose I could say the Scions. There's only a few thousand Scions left anywhere. Nanotech is heavily regulated. It would be a more accurate way to put it, Dream Whisperer. Why can't I start at the beginning? I suppose I could start at... Let me pull up my calendar here. I could start at year 5 in the new calendar, which would be roughly the year 2027 or 2026 in real life terms. Do echoes exist? Absolutely. The Bastion and the Echoes are a fundamental part of the Imperium. They have to be a part of it. Hi, Andrew. Mind Flayers and Illithids? No, 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 no. No, the Scions were a constructed race. I suppose I should... I suppose that term is inherently obvious, but just in case it's not, a constructed race is a race that someone else came out and built. And they sort of like... And they actually constructed this other race. There are several constructed races. There's also inherently magical races, and there's inherently elemental races. Those two are not necessarily mutually exclusive, or both have to happen at the same time. There's also... I suppose I should mention that within this setting, you have to be... See your Cord. You have to be born in order to actually be able to utilize magic. However... it is possible to alter your soul to be magically attuned. In hindsight, I suppose Final Fantasy XIV does something similar to this with the Garleans. I didn't actually realize that until this very moment. But, of course things existed before Year 5. Absolutely. The idea, though, is that it's not available to anyone, right? Bob over on the street corner can't say, I want to use magic, and then go get it augmented. No. And soul alteration is not an exact science, and is something that can go very, very badly. Now, there are a couple of caveats to the magic thing, but for the most part, across most of the setting, magic is something you have to be born to. In fact, there's the term magical, or excuse me, fantastical, and then there's the term mundane to describe the two types of beings. Is magic anything like the Force? No, magic is very codified in my setting because that's the way I think. You know, for me, magic is something that is simply another aspect of functionally science. In fact, I had to invent a new type of physics in order to explain it in a way that actually made sense to me. That's what I call the fifth dimension. Now, Ice Tray says, what is the Bastion? I can answer that very easily. The Bastion is an organization that was founded, I believe, in the immediate wake of the War of Annihilation, but I could be wrong about that. Let me double check here. Nope, I'm wrong. That's right, that's right. So the Bastion was an organization that was specifically crafted in order to help people help themselves, is really the simplest way I could put that. It exists within the Concordat, or later the Empire's, power, both magically, technologically, and in terms of resources and manpower, to just walk in and say, stop being dumb! But they don't do that. They are fundamentally opposed to the philosophy of doing that. That's against what the Empire is all about. So instead, it's more like they have individuals who have an entire fabric of support and information to basically send someone into a situation and be like, let's try and help these people help themselves. Because it would be easy to, for example, send an infiltrator to turn into an elf. We'll just use a direct example. And this new elf just shows up and says, hi, and basically becomes the leader of the world and takes over the world and helps fix all the problems of the world. But that's not helping these people help themselves, is it? That's forcing them to change, right? It's like Command & Conquer 2. Man, I remember that game. Thank you very much, Command & Conquer 2. Do you want to put that towards something? No, it's spelled the same. The Bastion is spelled the same. I'm hoping Supergiant Games would never come after me for naming an organization within my setting after something that happens to be similar to their game. But then again, I know how bad copywrong is, but I'm not renaming it. It's not anytime soon. So, yes, there are fish and chips, by the way. Dealer choice. Thank you again, Command & Conquer 2. I'm a little more of a Red Alert fan, if I'm being honest, but I'm with it. So instead, what Bastion agents will do is they will go ahead and they will send down people who will try to talk with people and work with people and basically introduce concepts or ideas and try to encourage people towards fixing their own problems. Now, the Bastion also universally deals with societal issues, cultural issues, economic issues, things that are more intangible. If there's a planet that happens to have a giant invisible Yoshi that's about to attack and kill all of them, that's not the Bastion's job. That's the military's job, actually, to go in and defeat the giant Yoshi. No, the Bastion's job is to try and make it so a society is not leading towards decay or self-destruction. Trying to, if there's horrible doom or death happening, or if there's some kind of dystopian society or whatever, that is the Bastion's job. Does that make sense? I'm actually curious what hang on, I actually have a really nice thesaurus, which I use regularly. Let's see what it comes up with for the word continuity. Although the continuum certainly would work, but then again, I have a lot of Star Trek fans, and I think I know what they'd think of if I called it the continuum. The permanence, the cohesion, the survival, the coherence, the continuation, the flow, the continuousness. I'll think about that. That is the idea, exactly, Doctor Who. That is the entire idea. And yes, Bastion obviously is a word that has nothing to do with, anything else. Now, Magister asked, I wasn't ignoring you, I just wanted to go through this. Is there a deity in my setting? I basically avoid ever answering that question. The idea is that plenty of people have their own religions and their own faiths. But as long as it is not what I call a provably false religion, then that's cool. There's actually an actual law in place to prevent provably false religions from getting out of hand. Let me explain what I mean by that. Because of the nature of how that works, it is entirely possible for Leander over there, who is a level 15 black mage, to decide to be like, you know what? I want to rule on high as Sultan and go find some random planet and just kind of take over and force everyone there to worship him, right? That kind of thing isn't allowed, and in fact is actively policed against. However, if they worship the Leander, who doesn't actually exist, or isn't provably existing, then whatever, right? However, it is probably worth noting that I try to avoid religion entirely in my own literary works, for fairly obvious reasons, because even discussing religion in a fictional sense tends to cause issues. And I'd rather avoid that. I need to hide. Yeah, let me actually use another example. This is a more direct example. How many of you have read the Thrawn trilogy by Timothy Zahn over in Star Wars? What Joruus C'baoth did would be considered no, basically. Walking in and just basically saying, "You are all now mine. You are my property." Oh yeah, slavery is not allowed, which is part of the point. That is true, Leander. If you stat it, they can kill it. That is... Third, my friend Third is actually running a module in a couple of months, in June, I suppose I should say, where he is going to run a party that is going to, and I quote, the planet of the Tarasques. Or Tarasques. I forgot how you're supposed to pronounce that, but anyways. Tarasques have stats. Anyways. But yes, the Bastion was specifically crafted because of the Elven Civil War. Now, that's a story I've never covered in detail. I was kind of hoping to really sit down and do that at some point in time. But the Elven Civil War basically happened because the Concordat were like, hey, here's a planet. It's the home planet of the elves. What's up? We're from space. Do you want to interact with us? But the elves weren't unified. The elves were kind of like we are in real life. There's no human thing. Right? Instead, there's the different countries, and then there's different political powers, and there's the different political alliances, and so forth and so on, right? So what happened was war. Basically, the various elven clans and various elven countries all basically went to war, and that war lasted, and I wrote this down, for 14 years, as they were all just killing each other and going, and all the different internecine policies and politics were all thrown into chaos because, hey, aliens exist and they want us to join them. And some people thought only certain clans wanted to join. Some specific clans absolutely wanted to join. Some clans were very against the idea of joining. It caused a mess. And it was more or less directly the Concordat's fault. Now, they spent quite a bit of time trying to fix that problem. And that's what that led to the development of the Bastion. And you can see why that would be a direct consequence of that. So anyways, that's the Imperium. Elves only live for like 80 or 90 years in my setting. They're pretty normal. In fact, I've often said that elves are the humans of my setting. Actually, no, Aethel. Most planets do not have a superstate. Now, planets that are part of the greater galactic community tend to have a superstate. I thought I answered that, Disco. In fact, I did answer that. Yes, they do. The one thing, I admit this is just me being me, but I kind of was irritated. No, Leander. I was kind of irritated by how elves are almost universally portrayed in fiction. We've actually talked about this recently. When it came to the Vermintide 2 thing, about how elves are always the super long-lived, super assholes, right? In virtually everything. And at least in Lord of the Rings, there was some kind of logic behind that. But in virtually every other setting, they're just copying Tolkien, right? So I looked at that and say, okay, what I want to do is I want to come up with a reason for the elves to be different from everyone else that doesn't involve them being long-lived. And then I came up with the idea of what if their species was long-lived, even if individuals weren't long-lived. So the way elves work in my setting is they are very genetically adaptable. What I mean by that is they can breed with basically anyone. It is actually very, very easy to be a hybrid with elves for virtually any other species. Not everyone, obviously, but there are half-elves of just about anything. And this has ensured that the elven species will continue to endure and move on. It wasn't until after I'd already started developing and really liked this idea that I realized I was basically kind of describing the Asari, but whatever. I swear that wasn't on purpose, but yes, basically kind of like the Asari. Elves can be born with magic, Master, but they are not necessarily born with magic. Well, actually, no, Micromano. Elves are one of the very few species that can crossbreed almost universally. Most other species cannot. At some point in time, I actually need to sit down and do a full, like, a diagram of which species can breed with which other species. But basically, right about now, it's elves with virtually everything else, and that's about it. Even humans can only really breed with elves and humans, for example. Funnily enough, there's actually another race which is basically straight up the Asari, which is still not on purpose. That would be the Lord Elves. Those are actually a crafted race, though. So they're Asari because they were built to be that way. There's a story behind that. I'm not going to bore you with it. So anyways, let me rewind a second here. So if I was to start at the beginning, like has been suggested several times, help me out. What is the beginning? Where do I start? Because I could do this historically speaking, but if I'm doing it historically speaking, then I need to choose a perspective. No, SJ. Elves have no problem making other elves. There is actually a bit of a purity of bloodline thing going on in the elves, but that's both a for and against, depending on who you're talking to. Can we read about it on your site? Well, that's what I'm kind of working towards, Colgrim. I actually have the beginnings of a wiki on my site, but I haven't really released it yet because it's nowhere near done. I have not had a lot of time to add to that. I could try to push more time into adding to that if you guys are actually interested in it. But this audio thing is a little more likely to happen. What's the main race? I suppose there are two, Doctor Who. I suppose that would be humans and Azimdi, which were the first ones to the stars. And hang on, I'm falling back behind here. Time-wise, well, see, again, if I choose time-wise, I have to choose a perspective. As weird as that probably sounds. A galaxy is a big place. I could also start with a race of people discovering the Imperium, or the Empire, I should say. A human perspective, that's the obvious thing, because they were the first people to the stars. The first major event that started the Empire, that's actually easy. That's the first contact between the Azimdi and the humans, which formed the Human-Azimdi Concordat. Which led to that. The elves as they enter the Concordat, so we can do that, because that happens about 40 years. Hang on, I have the calendar right here. That happens. The Elven Civil War is the year 58, is when that starts. The War of Annihilation, for perspective, happened with year 24. The Anurian Border Wars, which is another major event, happens in year 130. The Empire is actually founded in year 152. The year 180 is the Hatred debacle, which actually ends the First Era. The Swarm War is the year 230-something. I actually haven't decided yet. which ends the Second Era. The Pain Incident happens about 200 years later. That ends the Third Era. I basically use the real history of Earth up until a certain point in time, which is the year 2017, actually, is when I diverged the timeline. So I suppose if I was to start, I could start with year 1. Humans reaching out into the stars, the formation of the new calendar, the development of what will eventually be the space power of humans. Basically, it's another country, effectively. A country which doesn't really have territory in the strictest sense of the word, but is consistent of those who were space-bound rather than planet-bound. Yes, max time, but don't worry, it gets better until it's destroyed. See, I don't know if what would be a simple story to tell. I suppose the War of Annihilation is technically a simple story. That's year 24. I could do like a few brief snippets leading up to the War of Annihilation. Cover humans reach out to the stars, first contact with the Azimdi, the formation of the Concordat, and the invention of Magitech, I think would be the major events there. I would also probably discuss how this was and then leading into this, I would discuss the golden age, basically, the age of expansion, which immediately led to the War of Annihilation, which was a 6-year war that did a lot of bad stuff. How many of you guys... The War of Annihilation, admittedly, was designed on a conceit, but I loved the conceit so much that I absolutely liked how this worked, so I kind of designed an whole structure around this. How many of you guys have ever played a 4X game? No, Magister. If I'm being honest, I basically ignore Earth's history for the most of the story. Because... Anyways. So, how many of you guys have played a 4X game where you are not expanding militarily? Civilization, Master of Orion, Endless Space, Sins of a Solar Empire, Stellaris. And you have really developed towns with tons of production and very happy people, and you have tons of research, and you're really, really spreading your technology. You know, a peaceful run, basically, or a constructor run, if you prefer. Thank you, Command & Conquer 2. I know the feeling. I actually have done a little bit of truck driving myself, and a friend of mine did it full-time for several years, and I get you, man. And then you get to the point where you meet another power, another space-bound power, another ground-bound power, whatever it is, and they have a much bigger army than you. They're worse troops than you can field, but they have been expanding military. They've been dumping resources on their military rather than on their infrastructure and their research. So then they start crushing you like a bug. That's the War of Annihilation. What happens is the human Azimdi Concordat encounters a race of beings that they refer to as the Devourers. I've actually gone out of my way and never come up with a proper name for them, because there was no real communication between them. Instead, the Devourers saw them and were like, ooh! And the Devourers were heavily militarized. And they just started crushing the Concordat. And so for 6 years, what happened was the Concordat got beaten back and back and back and back until they were barely able to start pushing back a little bit and start turning the tide. But even then, it was kind of a near thing. Basically, the humans and the Azimdi nearly went extinct in the War of Annihilation. The Devourers did go extinct in the War of Annihilation because they fought down to the very last individual. There's also kind of a side story connected to that. And the reason I say side story is because it's actually one of the driving motivators behind the war. But I want to connect that to another event in the future, and I haven't really decided which one yet. So that's why I'm still just kind of leaving it off to the side. But that's the War of Annihilation. It was basically the wake-up call. It was meeting the Azimdi. That was the Vulcan moment. Meeting the Devourers. That was the wake-up call. That was Wolf 359 basically for these people, and they had to be like, ugh. And that led to a very heavy policy change for the entire Concordat. Good morning, Papa Neeks. What, Zeiss? They all died. All of them. Yeah, it was meeting the Zerg moment. That's a good way to put that. The stars have limitless potential. What are these guys? Ah! Now, obviously, if it's not obvious, I've spent quite a bit of time and effort working on this because I've been working on this for about 25 years now. Actually, a little bit longer than that, really. But point being, I've been codifying this for about 25 years. This is, again, why I asked this. So, I could literally just start at the beginning. That's not really a bad idea. See, there's a period of history which I call the Lost History period. Now, it's probably worth noting that I know exactly what happened during that period of time. And I always have. I wrote that story pretty early on. But I've been deliberately keeping it quiet because I want to do something with it someday. Either a movie or game or whatever. And so I don't want to give that away. So I probably start immediately after the Lost History period. Which, again, is the year 2021 or year 1 in Imperial calendar. But I do want to say one last thing before I cut off and finally start talking about Shazam. I'm sure some of you are thinking, God, would he shut up about his own thing already? So I'll probably go ahead and do the audio format thing. I'll set aside a section of the website just for the Imperium. And then start making these little audio things. I am going to want some feedback on how I do the audio thing. Because basically I could do modulation of my voice. Or I could just use my normal voice. So I'd kind of want some feedback on what you guys prefer there. The second thing I want to ask is... if you guys want to, I answer these Tumblr questions every week. If you guys want to ask any questions about the Imperium in specific, I'd be more than happy to have like a little section to, discuss a Q&A about the Imperium itself towards the end of my Loreweeks every week. It's up to you guys, as ever. It is your interest that determines this. Now, having said all that, sorry, Black Vial. Sorry. I know. So let's move on to Shazam! This is pretty much your spoiler warning right here. Shazam, spoiler warnings. Shazam, spoiler warnings. Shazam, spoiler warnings. Shazam. Shazam. I could Ice Tray, if you guys want me to. It's not hard to do. So you're on Junk Garage. Let's get rid of this. Let's throw up this. Audio log recordings. Captain's log, star date, 4342.8. I have discovered a terrible creature which is trying to eat my brain. I'm writing this as it eats my brain. Oh, help me. Oh, God. I am dying. Actually, I do remember Athlon. I saw you mention that earlier. Ugh. So, Shazam. Spoiler, spoiler, spoiler. Spoilers! Spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. Okay, I think that's a good enough spoilers thing. Everyone say my name! Billy Batson! No, say the other name. It's like my favorite movie and moment of that whole film. When does the lightning hit you? That's a good question. Can I just say, before we actually start, I feel like I enjoyed Shazam. Let me just go ahead and start there. I do like this. I do like this film, but it was weird. And before we actually go any further, I want to talk about two things I think it did very wrong, and then we'll talk about good stuff. So first thing it did wrong. What the hell was up with the tones of this film? Like, it couldn't decide if it was some horrifying, serious romp. Romp is the wrong word. Serious film. Or a silly kids movie romp. And it kept kind of doing this, and then going over here, and then... True story. You can ask Third about this. So there are a bunch of kids in the film with us because they thought this was a kids' film. And there's a scene relatively early on where a woman dies horribly, screaming, while being dissolved into ashes. One of the kids burst into tears and had to be escorted out of the theater. And when I say escorted, her parent took her and took her out and was just... And I remember seeing that and being like, okay. Because it was actually kind of horrific. Like, it wasn't overly gory or anything, but it was legitimately horrifying. What the hell was up with that? I didn't blame the kid for wanting to leave because she was just, I need to leave, I need to leave. And yeah, then there was the board meeting scene where they literally filmed it in the style of a horror film. Like, with the same type of music presentation and beats of events and visual presentation of a horror film. There's even the parts where, you can only see a few vague images of people screaming and clawing at the glass begging for help, and everything behind that is just this fog. And then you see arms grabbing them back into the depths, What? Now, I'm fine with dark stuff being in films, right? But my problem was it was so inconsistent with the other two tones of the film. Because there's 3 tones in this film. Like, there's just, evil death, horrible darkness. And then there's life sucks. And I'm just going to call it that. And then there's, and that's the 3 tones for the film. And none of them blend with each other well at all, in my opinion. So that's my first big problem with the film. My second biggest problem with the film is it's a film. Hear me out. I'm going somewhere with this. Several times I have commented on the fact that if given a choice, I wouldn't want to go into movie making. Because it is my growing opinion, and this opinion has never stopped growing over the years, that films are an inherently limited medium for storytelling. Because of the fact that you have to condense your story into such a relatively short period of time, it's actually legitimately hard to pull out a really good work without either relying on a repeated series of works, Back to the Future, Star Wars, or without using a lot of shorthand for events, which is what some really good films do, or focusing on a very small, condensed sequence of events. Jurassic Park is a good example of that one. And this film is just like the example of that, because this film should have been like at least twice as long, in my opinion. I know it sounds like a weird thing to comment on, but what I mean by that is there's something like an actual arc for Billy in the whole film. But what happens is the pace of the film, the pace of his arc, I should say, is like this. And it's a nice, smooth, gradual curve. And then just basically out of nowhere, it just ends. And all of a sudden, the arc reaches its terminus point. Just, because they ran out of time, because it's a film. But the problem is they should have probably condensed the gradual buildup so it isn't just suddenly this sudden lurch. Oh, just all of a sudden he's like, I embrace family out of nowhere. Now, I could see that if there had been more time spent on it. But instead, he literally goes about 15 minutes between you should only rely on yourself and there is no such thing as true family to I'm going back to my real family. Just someone downshifting on the highway there. Yeah, actually, it's very similar to what happened with Thor in the first Thor film. It's a good parallel. And yeah, that's why I say a TV series, a miniseries, would work a lot better for this kind of character moment. I was with the arc. Like, I think the character did a reasonable job of it. He did basically come across as a dick. Not evil. I actually want to talk about that. But just a dick who was very selfish and very, very stupid. And then, kind of and then he's okay with accepting the people around him who are trying to support him and take care of him. And again, I'm with that. It's just a few steps in the middle that are missing. Now, I saw someone in chat earlier say that they felt that the Billy's a dick section went on for too long, which is related to what I'm just talking about here. I do have to admit, though, that I feel they spent a little bit too much time on that section of the film, which normally I would be okay with because, I eat up character stuff. But the problem is they spent too much time just hammering the same point in over and over for like a decent chunk of the second act of the film. Was either him being a dick as a kid or him being a dick as Shazam. And just him being a dick and him being a dick and him being a dick. In my opinion, they went a little bit overboard with it. There was no need to have 5 scenes in a row dedicated to that. 2 would have sufficed. 1 would have been fine. All you needed to do was jump straight from him being like, "Hey, yeah, you're gonna show up, right, at lunch?" And then jump straight to him doing lightning tricks for money on the street. And then the kid shows up and tells him what happened in his absence, and then he accidentally zaps the bus, right? You could have chopped out everything in between there, and it wouldn't have affected the movie at all. In fact, in my opinion, it would have made it better. Also, yeah, Jaludo points out something that several other people pointed out. Where the hell's the wisdom of Solomon? Shazam, Solomon. It's right at the beginning there. Yeah, I also have to admit, I didn't buy the Seven Sins, although they did one clever thing with the Seven Sins, which I actually rather liked. I suppose I could say they did two clever things with the Sins, but regardless. Can I also just say that even though Mark Strong's character wasn't that great, Mark Strong was awesome. Because he's Mark Strong. Like, I'm serious. He actually managed to be appropriately intimidating in almost every scene he was in. Because he's Mark Strong. Because he's good at that. It was also kind of nice to see him playing off against, I don't remember his name, the guy who played the Shazam form, Captain Marvel. Oh yeah, we had to talk about that too while Third and I were waiting for the movie to start. I mean, he's Captain Marvel, right? It actually would have been funny if they'd actually called this Captain Marvel immediately after Captain Marvel. You'll notice they never name him, by the way. I was paying attention. They never actually give him a superhero name the entire film. They come up with a few, and it's a running gag. They just keep coming up with several, but they never actually name him. Which was probably a smart move, honestly, because you can only either name him Captain Marvel, which is going to cause issues, or Shazam. The Red Cyclone was my personal favorite. Yeah, cop? No. Especially given that Captain Marvel, the film about Captain Marvel, the woman, came out like a month ago. And then Shazam, the film about Captain Marvel, came out last week. Anyways. Moving on. That's true, Malachor. That is true. It was Captain Marvel first. I'm pretty sure Shazam Captain Marvel was first. I'm pretty sure about that one. But it's actually been a while since I've looked into that particular legal tangle. I like disreports. I laughed. Okay, let me just go ahead and admit, as much as I did have many issues with this film, it made me laugh legitimately several times. The beer scene. Because her reaction was perfect. I'd like to purchase several of your finest beers, sir. And her reaction, of course her reaction was that. Why would she have any other reaction? If a guy walked up and asked, where can I find beer? Here you go. Here's your frickin' money. Whatever. Right? And then, of course, they try it, and then... Oh, God, it's so gross. That was lovely. Oh, I loved that. Sorry. That was great. That was great. I also loved the bit, oh my God, you're immune to bullets, dude. Dude, wait, is it the costume or your skin? Shoot him in the face. Yeah, shoot me in the face. Oh, it kind of tickles. Pretty much, a lot of the scenes with Captain Marvel, just bumbling his way through things, legitimately made me laugh. Now, I have to admit that I didn't care for how much of a prat Billy was. I know why he was a prat. Don't mistake me. I fully understand. He's 14. That's really all you have to say. How many of you guys were 14 once? Silly question, obviously. But I remember being 14. I don't actually have a lot of particularly fond memories of being 14. Right? So, him being a prat makes perfect sense. It was still kind of irritating, because he was a prat. In fact, one of the things that kind of irritated me was he demonstrated very few redeeming character traits for a decent chunk of the first and second acts of the film. In fact, one of the things that also, this is just a minor pet peeve, is that he committed an actual felony in his first scene in the film, calling a falsified police report, imprisoning police officers, hijacking use of the police computer, oh, and also stealing food from the police. That is a serious offense. Or rather, those are serious offenses. He is damned lucky that he did not actually get tossed in jail or juvie. I'm not sure what it is in Illinois? Indianapolis? Whatever those. I don't remember what state that's in. He is damned lucky that he didn't get tossed into jail or juvie for that. Because he could have been, and in real life he absolutely would have been. It irritated me. But also because he was being a dick about it. Why would you steal the lunch too? So that would be Pennsylvania then, wouldn't it? Anyways. I do want to say, he did save Freddy, which is basically the only good thing he did in the early part of the film. And that's, in my opinion, one of the film's real strengths. So the film really hammers the family point in, right? How many of you guys called that the mother was going to be horrible the moment he did his little flashback about being lost in the crowd? That was, in my opinion, telegraphed way too obviously that the mother was going to be horrible. That was just... And it's so obvious, too. And you know why it's so obvious? Because I've been a parent and a caretaker of a younger child, and I could tell you that if I got separated from my child, there would be basically nothing that would get in between me and getting back to that child. Also, I have actually been... Well, I have very nearly been kidnapped before. This happened to me back in California as a child. And I remember it fairly distinctly, and I have heard accounts from the adults who were there with me. It was actually my grandparents and my aunt was there, and my mom was there too. And yeah, there's just too many things in real life that will actually get a child to have the ability to access their parent and vice versa again, as long as the parent is really trying. And by God, they were. The very idea that the mother did not immediately link up back up with him was in itself suspicious. The fact that when they did a jump cut, remember, to the kid sitting there on the police car, the moment I saw that was like, yep, no, she abandoned him. There's no other way. There's no other way that a parent would not be incapable of finding a child who was not actually kidnapped, but instead taken in by the local authorities to try and find their parent with information on said parent. There's no way. So it was really obvious from word go that his mother was a horrible person. That being said, I do want to comment on normal people, because I feel like that's something... Well, hang on, actually, let me rewind. Let's complain about one other thing about the film really quick. The bullies. The bullies ran into a crippled kid with their truck in front of dozens, if not hundreds, of witnesses. And then they immediately got out of the truck and started beating the crap out of him, kicking him as he lays on the ground. That's actually assault. As in aggravated assault. As in felony. And everyone just watches and does nothing. Now, yeah, it's basically straight... This is the Gotham thing I was mentioning earlier when it came to the Joker thing. It's Gotham! There's no way! I've dealt with bullies in my life, too. Very brutal bullies. But even they have never been at this level of absolute negligence. And the other reason that scene bothers the crap out of me is because it's actually in complete contrast to the overall tone of the film. It actually contradicts the main theme of the film, and that irritates me. And I know what you're thinking. Wait, what? It contradicts family? Family is not the main theme of the film. Normalcy is. Hear me out. A normal person does not go out of their way to do heroic things. However, a normal person also does not actively seek ill upon another. If a normal person sees someone who is about to be run over by a truck, they will rush to help. It will be an automatic thing. But a normal person will not go out of their way to seek out the ability to help such people, because they're normal. This is not me speaking down or up, by the way. This is just human nature. Hey, Mighty Mage. What's up? Yeah, I noticed that too, Jalito. And the film does an interesting portrayal of the concept of normalcy and examining exactly what it's like to be a normal person and how that is both a good thing and a bad thing. Because what most of Billy does with his powers is very normal. He goes and tries to make money to get expensive... He plays Mortal Kombat 10, right? Or 11, whichever it is. I'm not sure which one it is. And he... Shazam, okay. And he tries to steal money off of... Or bilk money off of people. He tries to steal money from the ATM. He does tricks for fun. He wants the praise of it, It's all very normal. But he doesn't go out of his way to do supervillain things either, because he's normal. I hate to keep emphasizing that point, but it's very important because, again, to me, this is the integral point of the entire film. Strong's character, who I don't remember how to pronounce his name real quick, please forgive me, he was not normal. He was someone who, when he sees his own assistant, who's working for him on a thing he cares very much about, die horrifically in front of him, well, that doesn't even begin to bother him. Why would that bother him? Right? That's not normal. A normal, sane human mind does not passively accept horrible death under those circumstances. And this is, in my opinion, the greatest dynamic between Strong's character and Billy. Because, they talk about pure of heart. Billy wasn't pure of heart. He wasn't. I'm sorry. But he wasn't horrible either, was he? If anything, I like the perspective, and I know people can disagree with me on this, but the perspective here, at least as presented in the film, is that Billy did not have a good, pure heart to begin with, but he might grow one over time. And by contrast, the reason he was chosen was not because he was some great legendary figure, but because he was the last available option, exactly. It was you or nothing. But thankfully, Billy was normal. And a normal person does not seek villainy. At the moment, Nerd Factor, I'm leaning towards doing the MP3 thing. I'm still trying to figure that out. But, I was gauging interest, and some people were interested, so we're probably going to keep doing that. If anybody tosses many Imperium questions, I'll go ahead and answer those during Loreweeks as well. And yeah, you're right, Papanix. His character... What the heck is his name? Hang on. I don't want to keep saying Strong's character. I know it's the doctor guy. He's from the comics. I just can't think of his freaking name right now. Savannah. That's it. Thaddeus Savannah. Anyway, so Dr. Savannah flat out said it in the film. No one's of pure of heart. And I agree. But purity of heart can be earned, in my opinion. Hence why I call that the main central point of the film, because that is the connecting point between Billy and Savannah, as well as Billy and everyone else around him. Let me put it to you this way. Billy had no problem stealing, a thing from Freddy, right? I think it was Freddy. God, I'm screwing up my names now. Let me double check that. Of course, I just closed the page. Because that's a minor thing. And I know that sounds weird because it is Freddy, I'm right. It could be considered not a minor thing because he's stealing several $100 from this kid, but truthfully, that is a minor thing to do, especially in the mind. You're not hurting anyone. You're not killing anyone. Like, of course not. And that's my point. I think with absolute certainty that if Billy was actually told, go horribly kill someone, he would be like, no! No! Because Billy was normal. I hate to keep hammering that point in there. Yeah, I liked that too, Negodai. And I agree with that, Andrew. You could be forged to be that. Also, Darla was adorable. Now, I have, of course, read the comics, so I kind of saw the spreading the power out thing because he's done that in the comics. But I have to admit, even though the moment wasn't really earned, like I said, they just kind of clunk the character arc, I did still very much enjoy the moment where he shares his power with his family. The only downside is the subsequent scenes weren't all that great, and this is where we should probably talk about the Seven Deadlies. First of all, it probably doesn't help that I have very recently, just a couple weeks ago, played Darksiders 3, which did a much better job of portraying the Seven Deadly Sins. Like, in every way. Visually, combat-wise, audibly, the voice acting. The Seven Deadlies were completely generic demon things who barely looked distinct from each other. I say without hesitation that I actually had some issues distinguishing some of them from each other. I actually thought that too, Papa Neeks. Although, speaking of which, weren't they horrible people? But yeah, they're just random monsters. These are the Seven Deadly Sins. Really? That's it? Now, I also have to admit that the speed with which the kids just sort of gained their power was a little bit weird. And it's also probably worth noting that... How do I phrase this? It seemed like the film couldn't decide what it was doing with the kids. Because they seemed to have all of the powers, but only really excel at one of them. But then they're not really at full power. It was just weird the way they present it. Like they couldn't decide if they should have all of their power, all of the original power, or focus on a specific thing. Like, I can't think of her name. The darling little girl. She was obviously really focused on speed, because that was her big thing. And the one big guy was focused on strength. Okay, that makes sense. And then there's the one kid, Freddy. He could fly. And then there was the guy with lightning. And then there was the college girl. What did she have? I'll wait. Because she didn't do anything. No, seriously, she was actually in a grand total of 2 scenes in the entire battle royale between the Sevens, and which also included him fighting Strong. 2 scenes. And in only one of them was she doing anything. And Shazam, Cap, didn't actually lose any power in doing so. Which also, consequently, was true with Strong. Now, we can kind of headcanon around that. Because remember, when Shazam was fighting Sivana, Sivana was down to 1 demon, and Shazam was down to having been split into 6. So we could argue that the 2 of them were both brought down in overall power to be, close to each other. That is within the realm of possibility. It's just... I feel like the whole thing was thrown together. I feel like the entire sequence should have felt like this big, awesome, this is amazing. And it felt like they just couldn't really cohese it together. Like they were just throwing the scenes together. I kept waiting for the moment of awesome, and I never felt it. So, it didn't sell for me. Now, that being stated, they did one thing I really liked with the Seven Deadlies. And I don't know if this is on purpose, so I don't know if this is actually giving them too much credit. But if you pay attention, Envy doesn't show up until the end, until the big conflict with him. In other words, Envy was always the one that was in Strong's Sivana, because that was his sin. That was always his sin from the very beginning. And I feel like that was on purpose, but at the same time, I'm not sure, But it was always the one he kept for himself. Whenever he'd let all the other demons out, Envy would always stay behind. I don't know if that's on purpose or not, but if it was, it's a neat little touch. Excuse me. Oh, you're right. That's true. When the batarang hit him. God, I don't even remember seeing him there. But you're right. It did come out. One and only time when the batarang hit him to show that he was normal without the sins, so that they could get the information that we already knew at that point. Are you giving a big... Only I will have the power to... Technically, yes, Kay. Near as we can tell, this is basically set in the DCMU. So, they do actually reference Superman, Aquaman, Flash, and Batman. Oh, and Wonder Woman. Superman gets the most references, along with Batman, for fairly obvious reasons. It's not Henry Cavill, before you ask. I have no idea who it is. I don't think even DC knows who it is at this point, to be completely blunt. I did like Freddy's reaction to seeing Soups, though. Just that... yeah, that was great. That was great. Anyways. Now, I heard Eingrad earlier mention that he wished that, the movie was chopped in half, basically. And I actually kind of agree, but I can't decide which half I like better. Because I kind of like the perspective of the... Let me rewind this for a second. Obviously, there's the family theme, right? But what I like most about it isn't just that it's family chosen rather than family blood, which is something I believe in very firmly myself. But it's more because of the fact that they are family also by circumstance. Remember, every single one of those people there, including the parents, were foster kids. People who have lost their families, their blood families. Either because they were abandoned, like Billy was, or for reasons that we don't know, because we don't actually go into the rest of it, right? I kind of enjoy the idea of people who have basically been tossed out, who then band together for mutual support. Something about that idea appeals to me. It's actually one of the things I liked about the Forsaken back in the older storylines of World of Warcraft. So, to me, even though we've seen the family theme done many times, I think it worked better than usual this time around. Just my opinion, because of the foster kid thing, because of the abandoned thing, because of the binding together thing. If I was being generous, and I don't think this is on purpose, it could be said that Billy knew his mother had abandoned him and it was horrible from the beginning, and just kept going after her for basically because of either obsession or fixation, or because it's his boat, because he can't face reality, that kind of a thing. That is entirely feasible. I don't think the film really has earned that, but it's entirely possible that that was going on in his head, that he always knew she was horrible. The catch is, when he finally goes to see her, none of that is on his face. None of that is in the way he portrays his character. What do you guys think? Also, she was horrible. God, she was horrible. Like, it was the worst kind of horrible, too. I was actually predicting she would be cartoonishly evil. Like, just, get away, you stupid kid, something like that. Instead, she was just straight negligent in the worst way. This isn't a good time for me. Could you come back later sometime? Like, you landed on your feet, right? Like, what? Just an absolute absence of caring. I could see the closure thing, Papa Nix. I could see that. You know what stuck with me most, though, when he met her? One of the things I've talked about several times when it comes to psychology of human beings is where someone will basically fixate on something, and then because it's all they've got, right? Let me use a direct example. And I know this is a contentious issue, but I think it's a good example. Do I have any chat right now, by the way? Chat's barely moving. You can talk to me, it's okay. I know I'm talking a lot, but I like hearing you guys. Hey, God Empress Finest, we were spoiling the hell out of Shazam, as you can see back there. One of the things I have talked about many times is StarCraft 2. Now, Kerrigan and Rayner didn't really have a lot of chemistry back in StarCraft. And then when StarCraft 2 came around, they were all lovey-lovey, right? And I had several viewers and several fans who called that out for being stupid. Now, they have a valid perspective on that, and there are valid reasons for that. But I always argued against that, because to me it actually made perfect sense. Remember, Rayner only had the beginnings of a relationship with her before she was brusquely taken away and turned into a horrible thing. And then all of a sudden he was given the opportunity of her actually being redeemed, or rather restored is a more accurate statement. Meanwhile, she had the beginnings of a relationship with him, and then most of her life was taken away, along with a decent chunk of her memories, and all of a sudden she has the option of being back with him. If you meet someone and you like that someone and you want to be with that someone and then they're taken away from you and you're shoved into horrible circumstances, one of the ways that human beings cope is they think about things, individuals or concepts or objects that help them to be an anchor. Exactly, Leander. To help them to anchor their sanity, to anchor their emotional stability. Now, statistically speaking, what this usually means in real life is that one person will basically end up being fixative, as in fixating on the other, and the other person will basically forget about them. Because the other person doesn't have some horrible thing that they have to go through. They just go on with their life. The Rayner and Kerrigan thing was unique because both actually had to go through the horrible things, and so both were anchored to each other. But usually it's a one-direction thing. And that's exactly what happened with Billy. And I love the way they presented that, because they did it wonderfully simply. Throughout the whole film, he's had that stupid compass thing, right, to help him find his way. And he says, here. And you could tell the actor isn't great who played Billy, but he does a few good moments. And there's a degree of hesitance, and there's a degree of, just, here, I brought it back. And her reaction is exactly what it should be. What's this? She doesn't understand the significance, the import. She has no idea what this is. She barely cares about him. She was his anchor. She forgot about him. And I liked that. It was extremely real in a film about a guy who wanders around in a big puffed up suit with a white cape. And of course he gives it to her in the end. You need it more than I do. Yeah. Someone say something, please. I feel really weird just talking to the screen here. Not really, Jordan. We'll see if it ever happens. I enjoyed the film, yeah. It had issues. Honestly, if I'm being completely blunt, I don't think it was really theater-worthy. But it was still an enjoyable film, a net positive film. I would probably put it at about the same level of Aquaman. Yeah, that was pretty good, Cordoon. I agree, Harian. That's one of the reasons I was willing to give it a little bit of leeway when it comes to the acceptance of family. Because like you say, the illusion was broken. Or maybe he knew all along and he just needed the closure on it. Both are perspectives that are valid but are effectively headcanon. The monkey thing in the jail cell, that was actually the caterpillar. That was actually in the... If you were paying attention, he's at the very beginning of the film when Thaddeus goes in as a kid, the caterpillar's there. Later on in the film, when he goes in, the caterpillar's gone. They actually even pull up the actual specific shot, and the caterpillar's gone. Mr. Mind, I think is his name? Hang on a second. Let me actually pull that up here. What I find most interesting, though, is that they're keeping Savannah. Yep, Mr. Mind, I was right. Which, I have no idea why they're going with that direction of all directions. But, of course, that's part of the Society of Evil. So we'll see where that goes. Yeah, Joker movie is the next DC film. October? November? It's later this year, I know that. Yeah, and yeah, I agree, Dream Whisperer. Like, there's just some really weird issues with the film. It's hard for me to properly enjoy the film. Because for everything that was good, there was something else that just made me go, huh? Which I've already talked about. What else do I want to talk about? Like I said, the film did make me laugh quite a bit several times. Oh, by the way, did you guys catch the reference to Black Adam? Technically, there were two references to Black Adam. One during the intro, where they mentioned they gave the powers to Black Adam. And I don't think they name-dropped him, but it was Black Adam. And then at the end, Sivana's speech referenced Black Adam. Supposedly, I have to say it that way, because he, again, does not name drop him. I don't know, Malachor. I mean, okay. I can go ahead and say right now what the biggest problem is with the DC MU. It's actually very obvious. There's no mainliner. They don't have a Kevin Feige taking care of the overall arc. They just have several people who are making films. And in my opinion, that is the single biggest problem with the DCMU. Also, yeah, the Rock of Eternity. I mean, oh my god, really? Lol, Leander. Trying to think what else there is to talk about. I mentioned Envy. I mentioned the normal thing. I mentioned the family thing. I mentioned the arc issues. What else? Semi-satisfying. I have to admit, I do like that he shared the power with his family. Like that's great. That's a nice, good, feel-good conclusion, and actually makes a lot of sense given the way they're going with it. It's just I don't feel the scenes themselves really pulled it off. I mentioned the bullies and how stupid they were. Running through the film in my head really quick. I think that's all I got, really. How much would I give it out of 12? 5, 6, something like that. Pretty average. Yeah, I do agree that the guy who played adult Shazam, whatever you want to call that, Captain Marvel, was good. In fact, I would go so far as to say that he was great. He was pretty much the perfect portrayal, and it's harder than it sounds to play someone like that. Although they did have a lot of little touches, which I actually really liked. Probably my favorite is actually one of the first touches they have, where he just smacks into the ceiling because he's completely not ready for it. No, that's true, more cowbell. Oh yeah, there were the doors to the multiverses, Ice Tray. I kept, like, I was paying attention during that section to see if there's anything I actually recognized. And I didn't. Admittedly, I'm not that big into DC Comics, so I might have just missed references. So if anybody else saw any references there, please feel free to share. Otherwise, I didn't actually catch anything there. Either way, I think I'm going to go ahead and chop this off and get ready for our premiere run. So for those of you watching on YouTube,